Is this quiet?
Victory there. The idea is that every vote counts, whether it comes from a city with a lot of Democrats or a more rural area where a Trump flag flies proudly. To that end, Second Gentleman Doug Imhoff is campaigning today at The Villages in Florida, the senior living community famous for its pro-Trump golf cart parades. Tamara Keith, NPR News.
FBI agents in Springfield, Ohio, continue to investigate a bomb threat in the downtown area. This comes after former President Trump pushed a false slur claiming Springfield's Haitian community is stealing and eating pets. This is not true. From member station WYSO, Catherine Mobley has more.
A morning bomb threat Thursday evacuated and closed city, county, and state offices. Now religious and community leaders are urging residents to look beyond their differences and work together. Pastor Vilas Dorsonville, director of the Haitian Community Help and Support Center.
We hope that if we still stand together and we believe in each other, and one day we will be the beacon of the world as a community in Springfield.
The debunked rumors appear to have conflated an animal cruelty case by an American citizen in another Ohio city and then spread in far-right Facebook groups. For NPR News, I'm Catherine Mobley in Springfield, Ohio.
There are still problems today in Springfield. School officials evacuated 2 schools today and earlier closed a third. They say they acted on advice from Springfield police. The UN Secretary General says he thinks the Security Council is in a time warp designed for another era. The U.S. is proposing some ideas on how to update the council. NPR's Michelle Kellerman reports.
Ahead of the UN General Assembly and the so-called Summit for the Future, U.S. Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield is proposing some ideas to make the Security Council fit for purpose.
What I've heard from everyone is it's time, and it has to happen. We have to start the work on this now.
The U.S. wants to expand the council to include 2 permanent seats for Africa and a rotating seat for small island developing states that have an interest in climate change. That's in addition to countries the U.S. has long supported, India, Japan, and Germany. The U.S. does not support giving more members a veto. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, the State Department.
This is NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Craig Lamolt. Newton Mayor Ruth Ann Fuller is urging people to show restraint after last night's shooting at a pro-Israel government protest in Newton. It happened at about 6:30 yesterday evening after a man whose identity has not been released allegedly attacked a demonstrator. Authorities say a scuffle ensued and they claim the demonstrator then shot the man, leaving him with life-threatening injuries. Mayor Fuller says she's making 2 asks of the public.
First, let the Newton police do their work and get the facts
The Middlesex DA
straight.
has identified the alleged shooter as 47-year-old Scott Hayes of Framingham. He's been charged with assault and battery with a dangerous weapon and in violation of a constitutional right causing injury. He's set to be arraigned later today. It's not yet clear if he has a lawyer. The Big E, one of the largest agricultural fairs in the country, kicked off today in West Springfield. The 17-day event attracts about 1.5 million visitors. On weekends, fair operators say daily attendance can easily exceed 150,000 visitors. West Springfield Mayor Will Reichert says police will be on hand to help keep traffic flowing.
Just be patient. The fair is a lot of fun. It's an awesome annual tradition that we have here in West Springfield. There's going to be some traffic.
The mayor says the fair is an economic engine for the town, but admits the traffic can be a challenge for some small businesses near the fairgrounds. Fair organizers say a good way to beat the crowds is to come on a weekday. The Big E runs through September 29th. Sunny today, a high around 80, mostly clear tonight and going down to the 60s, and a nice weekend. Sunny and in the upper 70s Saturday, mid-70s Sunday.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Procter & Gamble, maker of Nervive. Nervive Nerve Relief is designed to reduce occasional nerve aches, weakness, and discomfort in hands or feet due to aging. Learn more at nervivehealth.com.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library, streaming on youtube.com/GBH News. And that's right, if I speak first, it means Marjorie is not here. She's still recovering from her latest bout with COVID. I hope she's doing better, and we hope she's back on Monday. In the interim, extraordinary Boston Globe business columnist Shirley Leung is filling in. Hey, Shirley, how are you?
Hi, Jim.
Nice to see you. Wow, that was impressive. In any case, our text question of the day. There's a case before the state's highest court about who gets to keep a $70,000 ring after an engagement falls apart. You can text us at 877-301-8970. We can't wait for the court's ruling, so we're going to let you decide who gets the ring and how do we get to the point where an engagement ring can cost more than the average annual income in the United States. Again, text us at 877-301-8970, and we'll read some of those texts a little before 1 o'clock. But first, an important question. Could much of the cause of our polarization and dysfunction in politics in this country be addressed if we placed a little more emphasis on civics education in school? We were prompted by an Annenberg Constitution Day civics survey, which found that more than a third of Americans could not even name the 3 branches of government. And it gets worse. The real kicker came with a question about the First Amendment. Most everybody did know about the freedom of speech. Only 40% knew about freedom of religion. 30% freedom of the press. Less than 30% knew about the right to assembly. And just about 1 in 10 had even heard about the right to petition the government as part of the First Amendment. It gets worse. A little more than 20% of respondents thought the First Amendment included the right to bear arms. Call us or text us at 877-301-8970. Is civics education the answer? How much of a difference would it make with so many people's heads in the sand about just about everything? Massachusetts, by the way, has made efforts at mandates. And while civics education is included in the framework for social studies curriculum, they've held back on a formal mandate because I have no idea why, but they have. Again, we'd love your thoughts. Would civics education at least be part of the cure for what ails our politics? Our number is 877-301-8970. Do your kids have any civics education in school? How old are they again? 9 and 11?
11 and 13.
11 and 13.
I mean, I assume they learned something.
You assume?
I assume they learned something
Oh,
in
that's
school.
a good.
I mean, because we learn. Well, I
Wait,
guess
you assume they learned something? Oh, you mean about civics?
About civics,
Okay.
or at least they talk about. I mean, the other day though, I mean, a lot of the civics my kids get, it's when we sit around at home and have dinner together. Let's say we sit down as a family 2 or 3 times a week, because everyone's got different schedules. And we often talk about what's going on that day. We often talk about politics. The other day, September 11th, we said, did you learn about September 11th today in school? And they did.
Well, that's good.
Which was good, And so, but of course, they're in a family of, one's a journalist. I have, my job is to stay on top of the news and top of what's going on.
It's also not the same as a school having a well thought through curriculum about how government works, how you intersect with government. I mean, it's great that you're doing whatever you and your husband are doing at home. I don't know if you were listening yesterday. Sue was here. Sue was talking about her grown adult daughter, Ruby, who's a really smart kid, who when she was discussing Rudy Giuliani with her in a recent time, she said, oh, is that the guy who was in Borat?
Oh, really?
And he was in Borat, by the way. But and that's a really smart young woman, by the way. I am a huge believer, by the way, I should say. I don't have data, but I really believe if you know more, ignorance starts to disappear, polarization becomes less. I mean, we're going to talk a little bit later in the day with Nancy Gertner, former federal court judge, about challenges to mail-in voting by Republicans in some swing states. People don't understand what the rules are. They don't understand about when they should be counted, what's constituted, all that sort of stuff. And it seems to me basic education could provide some commonality and some, better feeling about your fellow man. I should say, by the way, it is not just the average citizen. Donald Trump proved the other night at Tuesday's debate, he has no idea how the hell a bill becomes law or how you effectuate a particular policy. Here he is talking about closing down the border.
Go down to Washington, D.C., and let her sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed. You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Right. You'll say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Well, that was clear. Either he signs the bill or he doesn't need a bill. He can do it on his own. And by the way, it's not just him. Another person who's run for president about 20 times, never lost an election, is the classic definition of narcissism. By the way, she's a local woman. This is Jill Stein on The Breakfast Club, revealing she doesn't know much about how the legislature in Washington works. Here's the host, Angela Rye, and then you'll hear Stein.
How many voting members in the United States House of Representatives, Republican, Democrat, and Independent? How many total?
How many total
Yes.
are there? What is it? 600 some?
No,
You know.
it's 435.
How many of you here knew it was 435 members of the House of Representatives? Well, that's okay. I mean, it's not spectacular,
A lot of
but it's a
people
little better than Jill Stein.
A lot of abstentions.
So we want to know if you think that civics education would make a difference. It would be another mandate, another thing in the curriculum, less time on reading and whatever, but I think it's huge. How about you? I mean, in callers. I'm sorry. Let's
go to Donna. Donna in the car.
Hi, Donna.
Hi there. Good morning, guys.
Hi.
Hi.
So I was saying to the screener, I've got two kids. One's now in college, one's in high school. And the only time they had any civics education was in middle school for half a semester. And I will say both kids learned from that. But where I think some of the fault is, when I was a kid, once a week I had to actually cut out an article in the newspaper.
I love this.
Paste it on something and summarize the article. And this was in elementary school, like fourth, fifth grade. And I feel that I learned about things in real time, real life. I could relate the Bill of Rights, the Constitution to things in real life. And we're doing the kids a disservice by eliminating, no one talks about current events. I asked my daughter, who's a junior, I'm like, why aren't you talking about the election and all these things? And her answer was, Mom, I think it would be too polarizing and people are afraid to talk about it.
Hey, can we get back to you for a second? How did the education you got around these issues form you, if at all, as an adult citizen in our democracy? Did it have an effect on how you participate, how you debate your neighbors? What's the impact?
I feel like it had a slight impact. I'm a social worker by trade.
Okay.
And I feel like in terms of like doing the right thing, looking out for your fellow neighbor, I had to learn like what the law was to some degree and where the rights are.
Mm-hmm.
And that does make it a little bit easier to reference that when arguing with people that are either ignorant or have their own spin on it.
Donna, thanks for a great first call. We appreciate it. 877-301-8970. My favorite study like this came out of I don't know what the place was called. It was published in the Minneapolis Tribune about a decade and a half ago. And it asked people how many could name all 5 members of the Simpson family, not O.J., but Homer. And somewhere in the neighborhood of 25% could name all 5. How many could name all 5 freedoms guaranteed by the First Amendment? 1 in 1,000 in the survey, which I think shows what matters more to people. 877-301-8970. Where do you want to go, Shirley?
Let's go to Chris in Swansea.
Hey, Chris.
Hi.
Hi.
I am a retired history teacher.
Great.
Oh, wow.
I've been retired for 6 years. The Massachusetts state standards for high school students, we spend a month on the Constitution in 9th grade.
Great.
I taught it every way that I could to all learning. Games. Divide the class in half. Have them pass a bill and try and get it through the other side. You name it. The kids are just not retaining this. I don't know what to say.
Well, wait a second. They're not retaining it?
Wait.
Because it's a one and done kind of thing? Is that why they're not retaining it? It's a one-shot, one-year kind of deal? Is that why they're not retaining it?
So sophomore year, they go on to World History 2. They pick up after the Civil War. In 11th grade, it's World History, and then senior year, it's electives. And that's the Massachusetts state standards, unless they've changed them since I retired 6 years ago.
No, well, we actually spoke to the former Secretary of Education this morning, Paul Revel, who's a regular on our show, and there have been efforts to mandate some additional civics curriculum, but they haven't become reality. Chris, thanks for your call. We appreciate it.
You know, one of the questions I have is, why aren't kids more interested? And I think about my younger son's habits. I mean, I kind of have to blame YouTube. I mean, he knows more about the Costco guys, on YouTube and TikTok. I mean, they're filling their brains with these, they're using their phones and they're filling their brains with other stuff.
Yeah, but there's a thing. Doris Kearns Goodwin was here the other day, and she was here not just to talk about what's going on in the world, but to promote her book that was just issued that day, which is the first book she's ever written for young leaders. And it was about the young, both Roosevelts, Abe Lincoln, and Lyndon Johnson. And the reason she did it is, one, because she doesn't think there's enough history in the minds of young people. But secondly, she believes, and I am 100% on board, which is the answer to your question, the key to everything is storytelling. Kids and adults don't retain data and hard numbers. It just goes in one ear, as they say, and out the you-know-what. But stories people retain. And so I think if it was tied to stories about things that happen as a result of this provision or that, effective teaching, and there are a lot of spectacular teachers, I think they do retain it. And maybe they even say, I'll prefer that to whatever else is occupying my attention. Betty and Dedham, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Thank you much for calling. Hi.
Hi, long-time listener, and I've gotten through a few times.
We're glad to have you.
I definitely think teaching... Thanks. I think teaching civics would be very valuable. I think that I'm a history buff. I graduated many years ago, and I've always stayed in touch with politics and history, and I do a lot of reading on my own. And I just think if you get in the habit, you start to enjoy it. The other thing I think that's important to note is that any immigrant that comes to this country and wants to become a citizen has to pass a civics test.
That's a great point.
So many times, immigrants know more about civics than we do.
Boy, that is a spectacularly important point
Just
to
have
make.
everyone take the
Betty,
test,
thanks.
right? All our
really
kids take
great.
the test.
Joseph M. Tex from Boston. I'm a recent college graduate who works in state government. I learned my civics from Schoolhouse Rock and have had to learn as I go, a film we were discussing a little bit earlier in the show. 877-301-8970. Want to take a break, Shirley?
Sure. So we've been talking about Americans' limited understanding of the basic functions of government and the Constitution, and if better, civics education can be the answer to our polarization crisis. The conversation will continue after a quick break. Stick around. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Nature is all around us, and there's some pretty unusual, amazing creatures if we know where to look.
To me, looking around, it's like we have alien life all over this planet, and we don't always remember to appreciate that or think about it that way.
Like this adorable flightless parrot that lives off the coast of New Zealand. We'll explore some of the world's living wonders next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Carr Financial Group, independent fiduciaries committed to guiding investors through the changing economy with wealth management, financial, and retirement planning services. Consultations can be scheduled at carrfinancial.com. And Willow Hill School on a 26-acre state-of-the-art campus in Sudbury, offering 6th through 12th graders embedded social, pragmatic, and executive functioning support in all classes and a range of extracurriculars. willowhillschool.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy. Shirley Leung from the Globe is filling in for Marjorie, who's still got some COVID symptoms. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. The Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, will be here on Tuesday for an hour of Ask the AG. And in about 15 minutes, you're going to hear some spectacular music to celebrate the beginning of Latinx or Hispanic Heritage Month. So you're really going to want to stick around for that. If you're just joining us, we're talking about this Annenberg Constitution Day Civics Survey, which found major gaps in Americans' understanding of some of the basic tenets of government, whether it's what are the branches, how does bill become law, what's in the First Amendment. And we want to know if a little civics education mandated would go a long way, not just towards educating the public, but in diminishing polarization in our society.
We got a lot of great texts.
Let's hear 'em.
First time using your text system.
Oh, that's very exciting, Shirley.
I know. This is great. So one texter said, I guess it says in Connecticut, we had a mandatory civics course in high school. And another thinks that this is Mary from Framingham. Civics most definitely needs to be mandatory on a remedial level for people running for Congress.
Yeah. Well, the Jill Stein thing we played a few minutes ago, the goal of this is not to diminish her candidacy, which should be diminished. But the woman wants to be president of the United States and is guessing that there's 600 members of the House of Representatives. I would suggest maybe she does a little civics education before she decides to run for yet another office and lose yet another campaign. And by the way, not that it matters, but for those of you who think that Trump's election was a bit of a problem in 2016, her margin in states like Wisconsin, meaning Jill Stein's, are what cost Hillary Clinton the presidency. Jerry in a car, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Shirley Leung. Hi.
Yes, hi.
Hi. Jerry.
Yeah, hang on. I'm trying to get you off.
What are you making another call?
Okay.
Order the bagel and then call us back when you're done, okay?
No.
No? Okay.
I just want to take you off this car speaker
Thank
so
you.
you can hear me
Thank
better.
you.
Yeah.
You're welcome. So I am not, I did not teach history, and but like the history teacher, retired history teacher who called, I do think civics should be part of classroom courses every semester, though, as a separate class, a civics class unto itself, starting in first grade, or if it can be in kindergarten, age appropriate, so that by the time somebody, perhaps white males, 60 and over, by the time they graduate high school, they will have a full knowledge, a thorough knowledge of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, all of the amendments, and then when someone starts gaslighting them about what is the First Amendment and what's the Second Amendment, hopefully a lifetime of education will pop up to the head and they'll understand that that's just not accurate. And like the caller just before me, I've often wondered, you can tell I'm very passionate about this, I've often wondered if I could pass the test that immigrants pass to become citizens. And I'm going to find out. I'm going to take it.
Well, Jerry, since you made it an admission, I'll make it an admission I was going to make. When I was quoting from the Annenberg study for Constitution Day, I didn't even know there was a Constitution Day. I think it's September 17th. I'm not sure that's the most important piece of information, but we all have holes in our knowledge. Jerry, thank you for the call. Remember when the then campaign manager for Donald Trump, I guess in 2015 or 16, went on Meet the Press with Chuck Todd and talked about alternative facts. Kellyanne Conway, of course. That was the first formal, I think, pronouncement that there's fake news and real news. The answer is there's only real news. There are only real facts. And maybe this is naive, but I think that if people have a common set of information and facts, even if all disagreement doesn't disappear, because of course it is not, at least you have a common starting point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And what's the great line from former Senator Moynihan? You're entitled to your own opinion, you're not entitled to your own facts.
That's right.
And I think part of the thinking behind that is if you have the same facts, it's much more likely you can have a normal, sane, non-confrontational discussion.
Another caller brought this up about reading the newspaper and having an assignment in elementary school. Same thing here. Another texter said in his seventh grade civics class, he credits his teacher for teaching us how to read newspapers critically, read articles, editorials, op-eds from the left and right. I was thinking, maybe that's a Boston Globe, business model. Maybe we need to go into the schools and do more in the schools.
I love that. And by the way, GBH, one of the great things GBH does, they have tons of education curricula. It's not mandatory, obviously.
Right.
A lot of school systems buy into it. A couple of fabulous texts. Rick in the car. This is really moving. I love civics. That's why I bought a Honda. That's the depth of knowledge most young people have of civics. And Mitch in New Bedford makes another excellent point. Why do we have to learn about the Constitution when even the Supreme Court ignores it? Another fine point. But at least you know how they ignored it if you knew what the hell you were talking about. 877-301-8970.
Should we go to Doreen in the car?
Sure we should. Hi, Doreen.
Hi, Jim. How are you today?
I think I'm fine. So, Shirley.
Hi.
Oh, good. Hi. I just wanted to remind you, when you said something about storytelling, I've taught social studies in the past, and I went back to the old-fashioned Schoolhouse Rock because they had something about how does a bill become a law, and then you could also engage students by making them, put them in scenarios, and they get very engaged in topics of the day. I remember way back in the 90s when Nelson Mandela was getting out of jail, my students wouldn't let that go. We had to move on to a different topic, but they came in every single day talking about what they saw in the news. So it doesn't take a lot but to engage them, but I definitely think that the old-fashioned Schoolhouse Rock is a good way as far as I remember how a bill becomes a law when I was a kid.
That's fabulous, Doreen. You have a little something you want to add to this, Shirley?
Yes, we were talking about this segment. I also grew up watching Schoolhouse Rock and listening to I'm Just a Bill. I think we have a little sound of it.
Here it is.
I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. Well, it's a long, long journey to the capital city. It's a long, long wait while I'm sitting in committee, but I know I'll be a law someday. At least I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill.
That's pretty great, by the way. That is pretty great. Schoolhouse Rock, I'm Just a Bill. 1975. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
877-301-8870. We're talking about whether a civics education, comprehensive, not one-shot deals, someone just called a minute ago, said, how about starting in first grade kind of thing, would help lessen the tension and conflict and polarization, not to mention the fact that it'd be nice to have an informed citizenry. It'd be nice to have informed people who are running for president, too, is a nice thing. Where do you want to go?
Let's go to Rosemary in North Falmouth.
Hey, Rosemary.
Hi, I'm a longtime listener, first-time caller.
Thanks.
And I'm a retired faculty member from Johns Hopkins University School of Nursing.
Oh, wow.
So I had a lot of bright students.
Yep.
And I would ask, I taught policy and politics as one of my classes. And I would ask them when I first started teaching them the first class, who their U.S. senators were, just one from each state, if they could give me their U.S. senators. Most of my students could not give me one, but except for the kids who came from Vermont. They knew just not only both their senators, but they knew their congressperson.
Oh, wow.
And our daughter-in-law's from Vermont, and I used to say to her, how come? And she said, well, number one, we're small, so we know everybody.
Huh.
But number two, we have to take civics in high school.
That's
and
great.
Therefore, we learn it in high school, and we don't forget it.
Wait a second. You were a nursing professor, and you taught policy and politics to nursing students?
Yes, sir.
That is fabulous.
Yes, sir. Because if we are the largest group of healthcare professionals, and if nurses are not at the table, then we will be always the one who are behind the eight ball. And
Good
the
for you.
physicians have the money, but we have the numbers. So nurses have to be at the table.
Rosemary, that was fabulous. Congratulations on that. You know what that reminded me of when she said the students didn't know who their senators were? You may remember this guy's name. I was at NECN, which means it was more than 11 years ago. And I had a business guy who was running for governor. I can't remember his name. And I said, you've never held office, so why should people consider you? He said, I've been very engaged in local politics and policy with my local officials. And I said to him, who's your state senator and who's your state rep? You know the end of the story. He had no idea who either of them was, and he dropped out like 2 days later. Do you remember that guy's name or no?
No, I don't
neither do
remember.
I. In any case, it'd probably be a good thing if you knew who your I'm not going to embarrass you. Yes, I am. Do you know who your rep and senator are?
Let's see.
Do you know who your congressperson is?
I do. Lynch, Warren, let's see, Driscoll, Timilty. There was just an election.
Well, that's pretty good. Thank you for not asking me. I appreciate it.
Brandy Fluker Oakley also, I think, represents part of
You're
Milton.
bragging a little bit now, I think. But I won't admit that I didn't know Ayanna Pressley was my congressperson until I voted the other day. I won't admit that, so we don't need to discuss it. Let's go to Kate in Bridgewater. You are next on Boston Public Radio. Hey, Kate.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for taking the call.
Sure.
A lot of your callers, while I was on hold, made some points, but my main point was I do a lot of community organizing, and I found that people are being taken advantage of that when they don't realize what their own rights are. We had a contested election one time in the city of Brockton that got fairly nasty, and somebody had created a Facebook post, and then an unscrupulous lawyer who will remain nameless sent him a cease and desist letter demanding that he take down his own post. And I'm like, what? Like, what is this? You have free speech, and it was so manipulative. So people need to know their rights and be able to stand in community with each other because, or they get taken advantage of.
That is a beautiful angle on this, Kate. Thanks for the call. Kevin in Hudson, Texas says, I'm a professor of education. I can tell you that it was very intentional that the U.S. curriculum moved away from civics and towards social studies. It's better we learn the major exports of Algeria than our rights and responsibilities under the Constitution. It makes us easier to control.
Wow.
By the way, speaking of politics, CNN just had a poll on the screen. You know that Donald Trump said he's not going to do a third debate, one with Biden, one with Harris, because he's won both debates. So why does he need to do it anymore? Reuters just published a poll a few minutes ago. The people they polled, 53% thought that Harris won the debate, 24% thought that Donald Trump did. So I guess he wasn't including that particular poll. We have time for another caller too there. Shirley?
Wow, we've got a lot of teachers and educators calling in.
We do. It's very nice, actually.
So, yes, it is. Now, Karen from Fall River.
Hey, Karen.
Hi, how are you?
Great.
I've spoken to you before because of Marjorie, the connection. Anyway, I'm
Marjorie's
retired.
a Fall River woman for those three people who
That's
don't
right.
know. Go ahead, Karen. I'm sorry.
She is. So I'm a retired history teacher. I taught U.S. history for almost 20 years in Fall River at both the middle and high school levels. And basically what we're looking at is that the history standards in Massachusetts are an inch deep and a mile wide. We have to cover all kinds of stuff in U.S. history. And there's no one approved civics course. Instead, what they've done at the high school level is that graduating seniors, unless they're in an advanced placement class, is supposed to do some type of a civics class, a civics project, which is not really particularly effective. They folded it in at the high school level, at least in my experience, into like a course around public responsibility, some voting rights, things like that, but it's not really a course in government. And if you look at the elementary and middle school levels, we're so focused on math and ELA because of the MCAS that those kids tend to get almost no social studies or history instruction. So we're pretty much failing to create an educated populace right from, the get-go, and that's a shame.
We really appreciate you sharing that
Wow.
information with us. Thank you, Karen. A lot of teachers, because they care about it and they know about it. Yeah.
Can we go to this anonymous texter? I
You,
love
of course,
this one.
can. Read away.
Right. The musical Hamilton taught my kids so much about the American Revolution and the history around that event. Maybe Lin-Manuel Miranda should produce more of these masterpieces focused on a new part of American history every 5 years.
Well, this
I
relates.
love that.
When I was mentioning the thing that Doris Kearns Goodwin was saying about storytelling, it's a variation on a theme. Wasn't a teacher who said Schoolhouse Rock, or somebody who mentioned Schoolhouse Rock?
Yes,
You
yes.
learn something in an entertaining.
It sticks in your
head.
yeah.
And same with Hamilton. For those of
That's
us
right.
lucky enough to have seen Hamilton, you do retain a lot because it's beautiful storytelling, beautifully written, beautifully performed, beautifully all those kinds of
Wow,
things.
Schoolhouse Rock. That's like 50 years.
It is like everything is like 50 years. You know what I mean? Everything
I still remember
is like
it.
50
I can
years.
still remember. I think that when they were playing that song, it's the guy's the little scrolly, right? The scrolly on the steps. That's
We
what I
had Graham
remember.
Nash on the other day, formerly of Crosby, Stills Nash and the Hollies, and we were talking. He's doing a concert with Judy Collins, I think, this week or next week, sometime in Boston. That's why he was on. And obviously we brought up the brilliant song written by Steve Stills, Sweet Judy Blue Eyes, that is obviously about the woman he was in love with at the time, Judy Collins. It was 54 years ago.
Wow.
Sweet Judy Blue Eyes was 54 years ago. And then Marjorie and I saw Mick Jagger, who's about 110. So he really is. He's like 80, or he is old, and can this man move. In any case, those are great calls. Thanks so much.
That's all the time we have. Thanks everyone who called and texted. After a quick break, it's time for Live Music Friday. Heading into the Latinx Heritage Month, we're celebrating the launch of Fiesta on La Plaza with cuatro virtuoso Fabiola Mendez and folks from the fabulous Agora Cultural Architects. Live Music Friday is next. Don't go away. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, Taylor Swift endorses Kamala Harris, prompting political analysts and pollsters to parse what the pop star's influence will be on the presidential election. From there, we remember James Earl Jones's magisterial voice and masterwork on the stage and screen. And the Museum of Modern Art's director is the latest in a string of leaders stepping down, radically altering the arts landscape. That and more on The Culture Show's Week in Review, today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Atlantic Design Center by Eldridge Lumber and Hardware, committed to helping you achieve your vision for a new kitchen or bathroom and guiding you from design to completion, with showrooms in York and Portland, Maine. AtlanticDesignCTR.com. And Mass Humanities. You can register for the 2024 Governor's Awards in the Humanities on September 26th at the JFK Library. Honorees include Martin Espada, Jackie Jennings Scott, Bob Rivers, and Cheryl Tony Hawley. MassHumanities.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy. Marjorie still has COVID thing. Hopefully she'll be back Monday. Shirley Leung, business columnist for The Globe, is filling in. We're streaming live on youtube.com/GBH News. And on Tuesday, when we return to the library, the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, will be with us for an hour for obviously Ask the Attorney General. Want to remind you of our text question that we'll get to right before 1 today. The highest court in Massachusetts just heard the case of who gets to hold on to a $70,000 engagement ring after the couple split up. Text us your thoughts at 877-301-8970. In the meantime, welcome to another Live Music Friday on Boston Public Radio. This Sunday, September 15th, at City Hall Plaza, the group Agora Cultural Architects kicks off their second annual Fiesta on La Plaza. It's a weeks-long string of free events to celebrate Hispanic or Latinx Heritage Month. The group's co-founder, Elsa Mosquera, joins us now. Elsa, it's great to see you again. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
They're screening movies. Well, she'll tell you everything. They're hosting lectures, salsa dancing, as well as fabulous, and I'm going to repeat it one more time, totally free live music. One important piece to all this is the woman standing to our right here, virtuoso cuatrista, Puerto Rican-born Fabiola Mendez. She'll be performing at City Hall Plaza on Sunday. She's here now for a sneak preview with her Fabiola Mendez Trio. For information on events included in the festival, go to culturalagora.com. For now, here's Fabiola performing Aguinaldo Hibaro.
Flora
campesina, ritmo vegetal, como un festival que no se termina. La alegría germina en frutos también, de lejos se ven músicos cantores, regalando flores a mi boriquén, regalando flores a mi boriquén. Flora campesina que bien se despacha en una guaracha, bomba y rumba fina, como una genuina expresión de quien conoce muy bien el seis y la danza, fiel de la balanza de mi boriquén, fiel de la balanza de mi boriquén.
Fabiola Mendez Trio, which, by the way, Fabiola, has the head of the library, David Leonard, tapping his foot over there, I should say. That was absolutely spectacular. Thank you. And she's joining us here on the set.
I'm sure I'm not the first person to say this, but that was fabulous, Fabiola. And I was hoping you could also introduce us to the members of your band. Who else is here with you today?
So I have Georgie on the guitar and David on the bongos.
Well, before we find out about what's happening over the next few weeks, which is the primary reason you're here, a lot of people who are watching or listening saying, what is that thing? I know what it is. What is that thing that you were playing?
So this guitar is called the cuatro, and it's a Puerto Rican folk instrument. It's actually the national instrument of Puerto Rico, used mainly for what we call jibaro music, or the folk music, country music from the island.
Didn't you have, when you enrolled at Berkeley, I'm going to get this almost totally right, the professor who you reported to didn't even know how to play the instrument. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So did you teach him? How did that work? I mean, what did you do?
Well, you know how music is a universal language, and when we know the notes, you know, C, D, E, do, re, mi, we can speak this, you know, we know what we're talking about. So I just had to tell the professor, this is how this instrument is tuned.
That's great.
And they were like, okay, I can kind of see how it would work. So I studied with guitar teachers, of course. Yeah.
5 pairs,
Five
right?
pairs,
So
that's
10.
correct.
So one last stupid question, and then we'll find out what the thing. If it's a cuatro, why does it have... Is that a stupid question?
That is a very legit question, and I get it all the time.
Oh, Elsa's with me. Thank you, Elsa. I appreciate it.
So the cuatro in Puerto Rico, when it was first developed in the 19th century, it had 4 strings.
Oh, okay.
So people called it cuatro. They were 4 double strings in the instrument. But as the instrument evolved, the shape of it changed as well. So it originally didn't look like this. For those of you who are just listening, the instrument looks like a small cello. The shape of the guitar, I mean the size of the guitar, but the shape of the cello or the violin.
Yeah.
But it used to have 4.
It's like the mandolin and
the
guitar had a baby, right? Exactly.
Yes. But now it has 5 double. No one wanted to change the name to cinco or diez. So it's still cuatro.
That's great. So Elsa, tell us a little bit about this festival that's going to be happening on City Hall and I guess all month long, right?
Yeah, again, thank you for having me. Again,
we're thrilled to have you.
Don't we all deserve to hear more Fabiola and what we represent, right?
We will.
So that is the reason we're celebrating again. I have to thank once again the City of Boston for partnering with us and for understanding how important it is to have events free and public and celebrating Hispanic, Latino culture and heritage. As I said last time, we are really underrepresented. So I feel that this big fiesta, where everyone can learn exactly what you're doing, what we do, how we do it, celebrate together, it's very important. So we're extremely excited to do this again.
Elsa, you had this incredible, a very startling statistic, right, about the percentage of the Hispanic population, Latino population in Boston versus how much is dedicated to arts and culture related to the Latino culture. Talk about that. Has there any progress been made in a year?
Well, we're definitely working tirelessly for that, to make that percentage a little bigger. But what I said last year, that 1% of the whole programming of Boston, it's Latino events or Latino arts, it's a shame. We are 20% of the population of this city is Latino. So it's really terrible. In our case, I have to say that first, we've gotten the support of Bar Foundation. We are supported by Mellon, and that has definitely helped in the work that we're doing. So this past year, we brought 5 artists from the island, from the archipelago of Puerto Rico. That is really not heard before. So through Bori Corridor, we brought 5 artists from the island. One presenting in October, Kiani. We are now curating the stage on Uncommon Stage. So every Saturday you can hear Latino music in the city of Boston. We are working also to, that I have a partnership with Arlington Street Church, just some steps away from here. Wow. And in the basement of that church, we have created Chroma, which is now like the Latino Art Center. You can go to chromaspace.com and you see all the programming. So I feel that we've made a lot of progress.
Mm-hmm. Last year was 1%. So what do you think it's this year?
I have to go and count it, and I will let you know next year.
Better than 1%, though.
I am
it
sure.
Sounds like it.
I am sure.
Like it.
I add one more number to this conversation. It's not just that 20% of the population of Boston is Latino. Close to 100% of the growth in the population in Boston over the last 20 years has been Latino. That's not a typo. Close to 100%. Do you find, are there venues for Latin music in this? I mean, you're a star beyond our border. I mean, I think people know that well beyond our borders. But in our city and surrounding communities, are there venues? Are there places to play other than special events like this?
I would think only of one place that is a restaurant that hosts Latin music during the weekends.
What is it?
It's La Fabrica in Cambridge.
Oh, of course. Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so I would say that's the only
Dennis
place that
Benzan?
comes to mind right
away. Is that
away.
Dennis Benzan's place, I think? Isn't it? I thought he owned it. I think he owns
I'm
it.
not
But in
sure.
any case,
yeah.
okay, good. That's great.
But yeah, I think that's the only place that I can think of that if I'm like, oh my God, I'm craving some salsa or some Latin music, I go there. But I don't know if there's others besides Chroma that are doing this work to present Latin music.
So what are we going to get over this period of time? In addition to the Fabiola and her colleagues on Sunday, what's going to happen? I gave you a little touch, but fill in some of the blanks there.
I mean, Fabiola is definitely our star of that day. But we start with Edmar Colon, a fabulous saxophone player. That is with the help of Celebrity Series, so thank you for the support. Then we have Fabiola, we have Meta Movements to give some salsa lessons, and we end with a fabulous Colombian singer-songwriter, Manuela Sanchez. So it will be some cumbia and some bullerengue and some Colombian music to end up the night.
And to find out information, cultural, Agora, agora.com. Tell us what Agora Cultural Architects does when it's not doing the festival.
We are really busy trying to make Latino arts more in the main stages. As I said, we have Chroma Space, which we are now programming full year long. We have a big project called Bori Corridor, which is mapping Puerto Rican arts organizations in the northeastern part of the United States, and with that, bringing 5 Puerto Rican artists to Boston, Hartford, and New York. We are now, we have created a new ticket platform to make sure that we have a community of Latino and Puerto Ricanos buying tickets. So the platform is bodytix.com. So we've been working on that to make sure that we have some sense of what the community is and how it's growing. So there you can also see the programming and obviously partnering around the city with different organizations. So I have to say we're working tirelessly with Emerson College, with Celebrity Series, with Boston Landmarks Orchestra, with the Boston Latin Quarter and High Square Task Force. So really the key has been partnering with community assets and with other arts organizations to help us bring Latino arts to where it deserves to be.
Fiesta in La Plaza starts on Sunday. We met you when you were doing the Landmarks Orchestra thing, right?
That's
Last
correct.
year. And did I read that you started playing this instrument when you were 6 or something?
Yeah, 6
and you were
years old.
ridiculed by your friends because
Yes.
you picked the cuatro?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
So this instrument had, this stereotype that it's because it's a folk instrument, it's meant for the people that live in the country, in the mountains, or for the elders, not for young people. So when I was 6 and I was playing this instrument at school, my friends would be like, "Oh, that's an instrument for old people," and I'm like, "What?"
Why'd you pick it? Why'd you pick it? Why'd you decide that was for you?
My family, we celebrate Puerto Rican culture and folk music. So I grew up around a lot of cuatro, a lot of this music. And my family, they planted the seed of love for my identity, where I come from, who I am. So from a very young age, I wanted to, especially after hearing those comments, I was like, how can I change and help change this mindset? Especially among people in Puerto Rico that have that stereotype. Because over here, I come with the cuatro and people are so welcoming of this instrument and joyful to hear it. So I want to just give a little bit of who I am and share a little bit of who I am everywhere I go and bring this instrument to light.
Are there new quatrists? Is that the right word?
Cuatristas.
Quatristas after you at Berkeley, or no?
Yes, there have been quite
That's
a few that have graduated already, and there are
great.
some that are coming in for this semester. So very proud of that.
And during Hispanic Heritage Month, you have an NPR Tiny Desk concert. That will be released.
Is huge,
so tell me about that. That's a big deal.
It is. So we had the amazing honor and blessing to be invited to record our Tiny Desk concert for the Hispanic Heritage Month lineup. So it's coming out in September, late September. So stay tuned to the NPR Tiny Desk website.
By the way, those who are not familiar with the Tiny Desk concert series, the last person I saw on the Tiny Desk series was Taylor Swift. I mean, this is a huge kind of thing. So you have to join your bandmates in a second. What are you going to play for us this time, Fabiola?
So we're going to play an instrumental piece entitled Capullito de Alelí.
Which means?
It's a flower.
Oh, it's a flower? Is that what it is?
It's the center of the flower.
That's a beautiful instrument. It really is a beautiful. It's really great. Do you want to rejoin your colleagues? Gently
let's do
put
it.
your headset down.
Thank you so much.
So Elsa, tell us a little bit about Fiesta on La Plaza. Will it be every weekend, or is it every weekend throughout September? Like, tell us more about it.
There are 3 dates in September. So the Fiesta Welcome is this coming Sunday that I hope everyone joins. Then the next Thursday, I believe it's the 19th, we have a panel with Afro-Latino artists.
It'll be on the City Hall Plaza?
At the City Hall Plaza.
Wow.
Everything is free at City Hall Plaza. So that panel of artists will be moderated by Cristela Guerra, and we have movies from Puerto Rico, documentaries coming from Puerto Rico. And then on the 27th, I believe it's Salsa Night. So we will end up with all for free coming to dance for a salsa night.
And did you have salsa last year too? Or
we had salsa, and it was so fantastic that people really asked us to finish the fiesta with that. So that's what we're doing.
That's great.
Please join us and come. And if you have time in Troma today, we have a Puerto Rican rapper, PJ Sinzuela, which we're excited to bring.
Okay, and again, it's free, culturalagora.com. And here they are again, the Fabiola Mendez Trio. spectacular. Thank you all three. That was great.
You've been listening to the Fabiola Mendez Trio, and thank you, Cuatro Virtuoso, Fabiola, and then also we've been hearing from Elsa Mosquera, principal and co-founder of Agora Cultural Architects. Jim, I think next year we're going to do salsa dancing.
One of us will. That's true. One of us will. That's right.
So Fabiola will perform with her trio as part of a free concert series this Sunday at City Hall Plaza as Agora kicks off their weeks-long Fiesta and on La Plaza. I think there's 3 events, right, at City Hall Plaza. For more information, you can go to culturalagora.com. Coming up after the noon news, we talk with 2 Globe Spotlight reporters about their latest on Steward Healthcare CEO Ralph de la Torre. Stay with us. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
It's not over yet. More smart conversation about community issues is up ahead with Jim Brady and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio. Right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And The Huntington, presenting Tom Stoppard's Leopoldstadt, a stirring and epic story of love, family, and enduring bravery set in Vienna at the rise of the 20th century. September 12th through October 13th at the Huntington Theater. huntingtontheater.org. Rhiannon Giddens meets up with Celtic harpist Maeve Gilchrist in a historic North Carolina train station to discuss musical traditions. Don't miss My Music with Rhiannon Giddens, tonight at 8:30 on GBH2.
Trusted. Local. News. You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters?
I'm Jim Brady, head on hour number 2.
On Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Nebraska's Supreme Court has ruled that competing abortion initiatives can appear on the November ballot in the state. Nebraska Public Media's Elizabeth Rembert reports both sides asked the court to remove the opposing measure from the ballot.
A Lincoln-based doctor argued the initiative aiming to expand abortion rights until fetal viability unconstitutionally addressed 2 subjects on a single ballot proposal. In a countersuit, a group of doctors asked for the same constitutional test to be applied to the opposing measure that proposes enshrining Nebraska's current 12-week limit. Ultimately, the Supreme Court ruled neither ballot initiative violates the Constitution. That leaves voters to decide between expanding abortion access or keeping the 12-week limit in the November election. The topic of abortion will be on the ballot in 10 states this year. For NPR News, I'm Elizabeth Rembert in Omaha.
Former President Donald Trump will be in California today for 2 fundraisers, including one near San Francisco. It'll be hosted by relatives of the wife of California Governor Gavin Newsom. From member station KQED, Marisa Lagos reports.
Trump will start his day in Los Angeles, hosting a news conference at his Rancho Palos Verdes golf course, before coming to the Bay Area for an afternoon reception at the home of Stacey and Tom Siebel. Tom Siebel is a billionaire tech entrepreneur. He's the second cousin once removed of Jennifer Siebel Newsom, California Governor Gavin Newsom's wife. Siebel's home is in Woodside, a town nestled between the Pacific Ocean and San Francisco Bay. According to an invitation obtained by KQED, tickets to the fundraiser start at $3,300 and top out at $500,000 for a couple. For NPR News, I'm Marisa Lagos in San Francisco.
Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign returns to Pennsylvania, a crucial swing state. Today, the Democrat will court votes in heavily Republican areas. Another morning of storm recovery in southern Louisiana 2 days after Hurricane Francine. PowerOutage.us reports more than 100,000 people are still waiting for the electricity and ACs to come back on. Temperature is projected to hit the upper 80s today, but some relief's in sight. Michael Willis, founder of the nonprofit Hope, says he plans to start distributing bottled water this hour to at least 500 families.
School just started. Kids went to college, kids went to high schools, elementary schools. And now to deal with power outage, to deal with trying to buy water, trying to buy food, we just trying to, assist them because, the inflation is something serious and there's a lot of pressure put on people. So right now, my main mission is to release some of that pressure that's been put on our community.
Willis says his group's distributing thousands of bottled water, reminding people that in the toughest of times, it takes a village. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up more than 400 points at 41,498. It's NPR News.
Good afternoon from the GBH radio newsroom in Boston. I'm Craig Lamolt. A U.S. Senate hearing yesterday on Steward Healthcare has revealed the significant and sometimes tragic impact the company's financial chaos has had on patients and staff. GBH's Sarah Betancourt reports.
Ellen McInnes has been a nurse at St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Brighton for the past 26 years. In her testimony, McInnes describes some of the substandard practices she says have been caused by tight finances. She told senators that when newborn babies die, the typical process is to place their remains in a special bereavement box and take it to the morgue.
Steward didn't pay the vendor and there weren't any bereavement boxes. And nurses were forced to put babies' remains in cardboard shipping boxes.
McInnes says nurses later pooled their money and bought bereavement boxes themselves. Steward CEO Ralph De La Torre was subpoenaed to testify at the hearing, but did not show up. He can now be held in contempt of Congress. Sarah Betancourt, GBH News, 89.7.
A study that explores the feasibility of using pigeons to guide missiles was among the winners of the annual Ig Nobel Prizes at MIT Thursday night. The awards honor comical scientific achievements. The pigeon study was done in 1960 by the late B.F. Skinner, and the award was accepted by his daughter, who's the head of the B.F. Skinner Foundation based in Cambridge. Among the other winners were scientists who showed a vine from Chile imitates the shapes of artificial plants nearby, and a study that examined whether the hair on people's heads in northern hemisphere swirls in the same direction as someone's hair in the southern hemisphere. This is GBH.
Support for NPR comes from Angie, dedicated to helping homeowners find skilled pros to get their home projects done well, from everyday repairs to major remodels. Reviews, pricing, and booking are at Angie.com or on the Angie app. This is NPR.
Welcome back to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Marjorie is obviously out today, still having some COVID repercussions. We hope she's back on Monday, filling in as Boston Globe business columnist Shirley Leung. Hello again, Shirley.
Hi.
Reminder about our text question of the day. Remember, we get to your text just a little bit before 1 o'clock on this question. There's a case before the state's highest court about who gets to keep a $70,000 engagement ring after the wedding thing fell apart. 877-301-8970 is where you text. We can't wait for the court's ruling, so we want you to decide. And while you're doing that, how do we get to the point where an engagement ring can cost more than the average annual income in the United States? But first, yesterday, Steward Healthcare CEO Ralph De La Torre again skipped a Senate hearing where he would have been made to answer for his company's failures in his own lavish company-paid-for expenses. Congress is set to hold him in contempt for failing to show up for them. He may even go to jail, just as he failed to show up for the thousands and thousands of people who relied on his company for care in Massachusetts. We're joined now on Zoom by Jessica Bartlett and Mark Arsenault from the Boston Globe. They're just two of a team of spotlight reporters, not only detailing De La Torre's self-enrichment, but the destruction and deaths he has left in his wake. They've done fabulous reporting. Jessica and Mark, we really appreciate your giving us some time.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure.
We did not tell you, Jim, that this is a Globe takeover of
Apparently
GBH
it
today.
is, yes.
You know, we got the co-host, and
In
then
this
we've
case,
got
it should be.
we've got Mark and Jessica. So a few weeks ago, the Spotlight team that you guys are part of, you delved into the lavish spending of the Steward Healthcare CEO Ralph De La Torre, and it was beyond the private jet and yachts that we've been reading about. And you know, so while the hospitals were starving for cash and and life-saving equipment being repossessed, and I think one hospital couldn't afford a bereavement box. So, what? Tell us more about how Ralph did this, and how did you guys report this story out?
Jessica, why don't you start? Go ahead.
We looked at financial documents, bankruptcy documents, and talked to a number of different people and found that Ralph had on a number of occasions dipped into company funds to fund what looked like his private lifestyle. So not only the jets that were taking Steward officials, to places that really didn't have much to do with the corporate business, but also we found that Steward had paid $3 million for a donation to a school that Ralph's sons attended. We talked to experts that questioned why a health system would be giving money to a school, nonetheless, in the name of Ralph de la Torre. And so there were a number of times where it seemed Ralph had enriched himself on the backs of the company dime.
Mark, you start this piece with an enraging example. I mean, it's a story of a loving son, Ralph de la Torre, who pledges in his mother's name $10 million to fund a new science center named at a school outside Dallas. His kids attended. Where did the $10 million to honor his mother come from?
Well, at first we thought that it would have come from the De La Torre Family Fund, because that's what the school said. That's how the school promoted the event. But looking deeper into that, that appeared not to be the case, because you can check the documents, the tax documents filed by that De La Torre Family Fund. It never had that much money in it. It certainly didn't record any giant donations to his kid's private school. So it came out later through bankruptcy documents. It would confirm at least a good sizable portion of that money, if not all of it, was coming from Steward Healthcare, while at the same time, Steward hospitals, doctors, nurses didn't have the equipment or tools to properly do their jobs.
Jessica, you and I, we both sit in the business section of the Boston Globe, and reading your stories, I couldn't help but wonder two things. Where's the board on this, all right? And second, Steward Healthcare, I mean, it's owned by private equity. I thought they watched the bottom line like a hawk. So how come the CEO could get away with spending money on, on jets, and I think there was like a condo in Spain as well? I mean, who was watching? How come no one's watching the books?
Well, a number of board members at Steward are executives at Steward, and so there doesn't really appear to be much of a difference in terms of oversight. We've asked the board members several times for comment on this. They have yet to engage with us, and so it is an outstanding question. Where was the board? Why weren't they overseeing this more? Why wasn't there more culpability on their part there? In terms of the private equity lens, keep in mind that Cerberus had an ownership stake in Steward up till 2020. And so, during that time, Cerberus was very focused on the bottom line, to the detriment sometimes of patient care. And so oftentimes you had, cost-cutting, reductions in staff, all with an emphasis on the bottom line, which did benefit to some degree the private equity firm. Ultimately, Cerberus exited with over $800 million in profit. And then once they exited, you saw Ralph kind of upping the number of times that he was taking money out of the system. So there was some degree of oversight when Cerberus was there, particularly focused on the bottom line, but to their benefit. But we do see a lot of things escalate even after Cerberus's exit.
Mark, just to get the rage quotient a little bit higher, could you describe some of the other self-enrichment that you report on, from the apartments, the condos, the travel, the management fees in the millions of dollars? Pick one or two and fill in a blank or two, if you would, please, Mark.
I don't know. I like the boats. I like the boats. I like the. I think that's an easy one for people to grasp. I mean, the owners of Steward took a more than $100 million distribution from the company in January of 2021, in the middle of a pandemic, and then shortly after that, De La Torre bought a yacht valued at more than $40 million. And again, a lot of the examples in the story that we published just this weekend happened around this time. After they took this big distribution, after we bought the boat, people died in Steward hospitals after not receiving the professionally accepted standard of care due to a lack of supplies or a lack of staff.
We want to talk about what you both mentioned, what was going on in terms of patient care or non-care while De La Torre was enriching himself. But a small controversy erupted on our show a couple of days ago, not directly between them, but Senator Warren was with us a few days ago and had something to say about De La Torre. The next day, we asked Governor Healy about the same thing, and they had a difference of agreement, and maybe you can settle it. Again, here's Senator Warren and then the governor.
What the heck is Ralph De La Torre doing still in charge of Steward Hospitals? The chain is now in bankruptcy. That means there is a bankruptcy judge that has some oversight. But De La Torre is the guy who's still in there. He's got access to all of the information. He's the one negotiating the deals on which hospitals are closed.
This is in bankruptcy right now. It's out of Ralph De La Torre's hands, and he's got to be focused on lawyering up because he is going to be investigated and prosecuted.
So, Jessica, can you settle this dispute? Is De La Torre still have any control over decisions that are made about Steward Healthcare?
De La Torre is still the CEO of the company. He has not been removed from the company. It is in the auspices of the bankruptcy court, and so there's more oversight. There's patient ombudsmen who are paying more close attention to what's happening kind of at each hospital. All of the sales process needs to be approved by a bankruptcy court. So there's certainly more of a degree of oversight than there has been. But De La Torre has not been removed from the company.
Well, let me ask you, Jessica, staying with you, the reason I not only asked the question of Healy, Governor Healy, because Senator Warren had broached this, but it seemed to me that if he had any control, even if it was limited, comparatively speaking, that one of the parties to the proceeding, like Massachusetts, might ask the bankruptcy judge to remove him. Has there been any attempt to remove De La Torre completely from any authority over the finances and operation of Steward Healthcare?
I think there was certainly a desire to do so. Public officials mentioned that they wanted that to occur. I think Healy herself, early on in this process, said he shouldn't remain in charge. Whether Massachusetts officials have that authority in the bankruptcy court, I'm not sure. But it's a question.
Let's Jim, talk about, if I could
sure,
add
Mark,
to that
absolutely,
of course. Is that De La Torre, by all accounts, is still the largest owner of Steward. So he's not he's not an employee. He owns the thing. It's his company at this point, to a large extent. I think goes a long way to explaining why he's still there.
We're talking to Mark Arsenault and Jessica Bartlett, who are among the Spotlight team members who've done wonderful reporting exposing both De La Torre himself and the consequences of De La Torre's behavior.
Jessica, can you talk about the story that ran Sunday in the paper where the Spotlight team chronicled at least 15 patient deaths at Steward Healthcare hospitals, not only here in Massachusetts, but across the country, related to really kind of mismanagement of these hospitals?
Yeah, so we looked at a variety of different public records, spoke to over 100 different former and current Steward employees to look at instances in which patients died that could be tied in some way to a corporate decision making. And so this does not count like medical errors or anything like that. And what we found also through a review of federal investigations into Steward was that there were 15 deaths that could be tied to corporate decision making, 16 injuries, and at least 2,000 people, according to federal regulators, were put at risk in these hospitals during these circumstances. And so all of this, we found that in terms of how many times federal regulators had flagged kind of the loudest alarm against the company, called immediate jeopardy. They had done so 32 times in the last 5 years, which was nearly 3 times as many as other Medicare certified hospitals. So it wasn't just that the corporate decision making had put patients at risk and that we had found connected to deaths, but that systematically Steward hospitals have been worse by quality ratings, by federal rankings, by investigations over the last period of 5 years.
You know, Jessica, staying with you for a second, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was your story in January, which was the first I read about, I hope I pronounced her name right, Sunjita Rashid, the first death I had read about because of the repossession of a device, an embolism coil that arguably could have saved Ms. Rashid's life, and that started this horrible saga, at least in the public's eyes. Can you briefly tell us what happened to Ms. Rashid?
Yeah, so Sangeeta Rashid, 39 years old, went into St. Elizabeth's for a pretty routine birth, had a normal birth, but started bleeding afterwards. And the nurses had been saying for weeks that the hospital did not have an embolism coil. It's a device that's used to stop internal bleeding. That memo had not gone out to everyone. And so in the operating room, when they're trying to resolve Sangeeta's bleeding, they realized they don't have the embolism coil. Now, nurses knew that they didn't have it because the vendor had come in a couple weeks prior and repossessed it, saying that Steward had not paid the bills. And so that was the first kind of time we witnessed that Steward corporate decision making had harmed patients, that it wasn't just that operations were being delayed, that patients weren't getting high staffing, which is certainly serious in its own regard, but that things had gone even further and that patients had been actually harmed as a result of these corporate decisions.
You know, and are there other, Mark, it's up to you, but there are other stories that I think are worth spending a minute on about the pain that families suffer by the loss of someone they loved. Would you share another one with us, please?
Yeah, I mean, these are all really tough cases. I think Gilberto Melendez Brancaccio, who was a Quincy guy, who was 31 years old, a beloved nephew, beloved uncle, had some mental health problems that were often managed with medication. Sometimes he didn't take it because he didn't like how the medication made him feel. And on one of those occasions, he suffered some delusions. Quincy police found him and did the reasonable thing and brought him to the hospital. They brought him to Kearney, Steward Hospital in Dorchester. And when he was there, you know, he was restrained both physically and chemically. And the doctors said that he was not to be left alone. I mean, he was experiencing respiratory problems, and the policy would be if a patient was being restrained, they needed to be monitored one-on-one. But the hospital didn't have enough people to monitor him one-on-one, and he was left alone. And no one was there to do anything when his heart stopped. No one was there to call the alarm. No one was there to resuscitate him. And 19 hours after he went into a Steward hospital, they wheeled his body to the morgue.
I mean, as tragic as the stories that you guys are recounting of what happened in Massachusetts, the Sunday story also talked about what happened at it was at Glenwood Hospital in Louisiana. It seems like that was the far worst, among the worst, or perhaps the worst Steward Care hospital. Can you talk about what happened there?
Yeah. I went to West Monroe, Louisiana. I'm reporting this story, and I went to Glenwood. A lot of things happened there. It led the Steward chain in immediate jeopardy findings, which, as Jess just mentioned, are the most serious findings against the hospital by hospital regulators. It had 9 such findings in the last 5 years, which is a staggering amount. It puts Glenwood in the top 10 worst, or I would say maybe the bottom 10 nationwide out of more than 6,000 hospitals. One thing we found was that in 2021, during COVID, people in the COVID ICU were getting mold infections in their breathing passages. This is a really serious situation. The mold is called Aspergillus, and it's extremely hard to treat. It's really hard to survive. Most people die when they get this. But the understaffed infection control department at Glenwood Hospital didn't really begin an investigation until they had already had 3 people with this infection. As it turned out, 5 people got it and 4 people died. The cleaners that the hospital had hired didn't have the right equipment to clean in a medical environment. The hospital actually later admitted to federal regulators. So, yeah, Glenwood was a really tough case, and it's difficult because it's it's a community hospital, like a lot of these Steward hospitals, in an area that's not real wealthy, and an area that really depends on that hospital, which started as a public hospital in the 1960s. And I think it's really galling to a lot of people. And I remember what I heard down there from a lot of people I talked to was they just can't understand how a company can just come into your community and wreck your healthcare.
You know, can we talk briefly, Jessica and Mark, about the consequences, if there are going to be any? Before we do that, I should say that there was legislation pending on Beacon Hill, a hospital oversight bill that BUR reported was initially passed in response to Steward's financial turmoil. No surprise, I think, probably to most of our listeners, it didn't pass in time for the legislature's 5-month vacation. And the Speaker of the House said it was too important to get lost in the shuffle and get watered down, but it was obviously not important enough to delay a vacation a week. So forgetting what Beacon Hill will or will not do, at least in the next few months, we read in the Globe that Malta had brought criminal charges against De La Torre and a number 2 person in the country. And I always worry that if the Sacklers are not in jail, no CEO is going to be in jail for what he or she does to real people. But starting with you, Jessica, there are U.S. attorneys, including one here, who are looking into these behaviors. Again, massive self-enrichment at the same time that the company is losing hundreds of millions of dollars and, as you've both reported, cut back on life-saving services. What is the status, as best you know, of investigations into De La Torre and Steward?
Yeah, so the personal spending that you bring up is one of the focuses of a grand jury investigation in Boston that's looking into Steward. There's also a separate federal investigation into Steward for potential corruption in its international business. And so those two things are happening simultaneously. You also have Dr. De La Torre was called to testify yesterday at the Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. The Health Committee. And though he didn't appear, the Health Committee plans to hold a vote to hold him in contempt next Thursday, which could carry both criminal ramifications as well as civil ones. And then you also have federal legislators who are trying to pass increased transparency and tighten oversight of private equity nationally. So there are some things happening, but it's a question that you raise that is a good point. I mean, so often we see white collar crimes in particular not have the full ramifications that they should. And so it's an outstanding question whether these things will ultimately result in any lasting change.
You know, Mark, I have to say, I shouldn't even be asking a legal question, but I'll say what my thing is. I'm sort of a backseat lawyer, even though I'm a lawyer. But when I read this embolism coil story that Jessica wrote in January, I said, all you have to demonstrate is at the same time that the equipment had been repossessed that would have saved Ms. Rashid's life, that the company was spending X amount of dollars on the entertainment and happiness of their CEO. So it seems to me the connection is not that tough. Do you know if the Attorney General is going to be with us on Tuesday, meaning our Attorney General, Andrea Campbell? Do you know if the state is looking into any of these issues, either criminally, civilly, whatever? Do you know?
Well, it'd be a dereliction of duty if they weren't. I'll be looking forward to her answer when you have her on.
So will I. So will I. So I have to say, you all, is there anything we missed, by the way, that you think it's important for people? First of all, people should read every single piece of this online. There's some sections, hard copies of it. It is really an important story if you care about your fellow humans and your families. Anything, Jessica or Mark, that you want to impart before you go? Mark, take it away.
I would say we have, the piece on Sunday has a sidebar where we recount what happened to the 15 people who died after not getting the right care. I would hope that people would read about all those little capsules and read about the human beings that were harmed by this company's practices, because that's why we did this story, is to bring some accountability for those people.
Jessica, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I would note that this is a situation that hasn't just affected the families that have lost loved ones or the individuals who have been harmed, but it really is reshaping healthcare for the entire state. We have what was once a 9-hospital system that is now going to be divvied up amongst a bunch of other health systems that will fundamentally change the structure of Massachusetts healthcare, not to mention nationally. You've got healthcare systems nationally that are being sold to different operators. And so the ramifications of one company that had really consolidated a number of community hospitals will last for decades. And that'll be something that we're following too. What does this mean for the state healthcare system? What does this mean for these communities long term? What are the ripple effects of all of this harm that we see year after year?
Jessica and Mark, can't thank you enough for your work and your time today. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Right on. Thanks, Jim.
We've been speaking with Jessica Bartlett, medical reporter for the Boston Globe, and Mark Arsenault, his investigations reporter. I think this is the end of the Globe takeover, right, of GBH.
You never know, my friend.
You can see more of their incredible reporting on this Steward Healthcare at bostonglobe.com/spotlight. Coming up after a quick break, the Secretary of MassDOT, Monica Tibbits-Nutt. She is here. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH Live from the BPL and streaming at youtube.com GBH News.
A national youth voting organization is trying to register more young men of color for the election in November, but can it do so without coming off as pandering?
It's very demeaning sometimes where, you're on a national stage and it's like, oh, if you want to draw in black people, you gotta, have a rapper come in and, be belligerent and things of that nature.
I'm Ari Shapiro. That story on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you and Johnson & Wales University. From business to nursing, JWU strives to provide the needed network and industry know-how. Learn more at jwu.edu. And Burton's Grill and Bar, featuring contemporary American cuisine with signature dishes such as crab-crusted haddock, superfood salad, Mediterranean chicken risotto, and the Max Burger. burtonsgrill.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan still has COVID. We hope she'll be back Monday. Shirley Leung, great business columnist at the Globe, is filling in. We're streaming live from the Boston Public Library, youtube.com/GBH News. The Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, will be here Tuesday for an hour to answer your questions and ours. We will obviously discuss Steward Healthcare, among other things. Here for, I think, her first time on Boston Public Radio as Secretary and CEO of the Mass Department of Transportation, or MassDOT, is Monica Tibbits-Nutt, to talk about, the Sumner Tunnel, Cape Cod Bridges, East-West Rail.
You brought us gifts, actually.
That always works, by the way, I have to be honest. What swag did you bring?
Oh, we've got hats, we've got cones, squishies,
What is this cone?
mugs.
What is this?
That's from the Sumner Tunnel.
Is this like a stress cone? What is this?
How often are you using that thing?
Quite often.
I bet you are. Thank you. You're very generous, very kind. Thanks so much.
Thank you. So, Secretary, you are almost been in your role for a year. So
a year and 2 days.
A year and 2 days. So, so what has it been like? What has it been like? Because you were a longtime advocate, you were on the T board. So, what is it like to be the secretary for the past year?
It's been amazing. I think this is the type of job you dream of when you do the work I do. And being able to be on this side, being on the board is very, very different than being actually internal with the staff. But it's been exciting, and we've been able to actually do a lot of projects that have been very difficult and been able to do them in a way that I don't think the public ever thought we could.
Give us a couple of examples of things that have, at minimum, even if not to completion, have made dramatic moves forward in the year you've been around.
I would say the Sumner Tunnel, first of all. As everyone knows, we needed to close it down for 2 months last summer. With all the work we've been doing on weekends, we were able to shave it down to just 1 month this summer, and we will be done with weekend closures in October, 2 months early.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Are you done? That's it?
We will be done.
Really?
Finished, no more closures, done.
Wow, that's great.
What else?
West East Rail, which has been a passenger rail project that people have been dreaming of from a very long time. It's connecting Boston all the way out to Pittsfield and then Albany, New York. Being able to get $108 million for the Springfield track has been huge. I don't think anyone thought we were going to be able to do that because, as everyone knows, that's a very hard connection for a lot of people. Once you get outside of the inner core, there aren't a lot of rail options, and we're continuing to move forward with that project as well.
I mean, Richie Neal, I think people know, if the Democrats take control again, you don't build East-West Rail, he's going to defund Massachusetts, so there's a pretty good reason for you to do it. He's a key financial guy. What's the realistic status and timetable for both that and North-South Rail, which we've been talking about for centuries in Massachusetts?
So for West East Rail, the $108 million part of this project, we will be active in most likely 2028, having those 2 additional trains out there. North-South Rail, this is a project that's been talked about for 20 plus years. Congressman Moulton recently has done some research with Harvard Kennedy School on this. We've been in contact with him, and what we're doing now is really putting together what it would take for MassDOT to do a feasibility test of that project.
How about every time I drive to the Cape, I was just in the Cape a couple of weeks ago, every time I drive over the Sagamore Bridge, if I were religious, I'd cross myself, but I am not religious. It is, to me, scary. I know we're committed to rebuilding the bridge. It's got a few $100 million from the feds, but that's well short of what the actual cost is going to be. Are we going to be able to fill that hole and actually get this done?
So for the Sagamore, we have $1.74 billion. We have more than enough to do the Sagamore Bridge, yes, and begin the planning for the Bourne Bridge. And just so you know, you don't need to be praying to anyone. We have no unsafe bridges in Massachusetts. If it was unsafe, it would be closed.
Well, there are. I mean, even if it's not unsafe, there is a category or descriptor short of unsafe that hundreds of bridges are. What is it, deficient or whatever they...
Structurally deficient.
Structurally. I mean, that's fairly nerve-wracking for mere mortals. Should it not be?
It shouldn't be.
Why not?
Structurally deficient means that we need more rehabilitation of it or full replacement. If it's unsafe, we close it. And we do have bridges within Massachusetts that are completely closed because they are not safe for travel.
We're talking to Monica Tibbits-Nutt, who's, of course, the Secretary of Transportation.
So before you became secretary, you championed a reduced fare program for low-income riders. And I think recently the state opened up applications, right?
Yes.
You want to, I think you were hoping to get 60,000 people as part of this program. So how's it going? I mean, are people signing up and when will this, I don't know if maybe it's already started.
Started on September 4th. And as you know, this is a project I've been working on in 3 different positions for a little over 10 years. And anyone that watched that vote, I was getting teared up. This has been something that we've been pushing for, and the amount of difference this is going to make for millions of riders is amazing. This is a 50% discount off of your T fare, and it's across the entire system. Commuter rail, ferry boat, subway, and bus. The overwhelming response just from September 4th has been amazing. And now we're really pushing out that information to the community groups and making sure that everyone understands that this is now available to them.
And how many people you think will use it?
Honestly, I would probably say in the millions, but, but we are not sure at this point. I would say in the next 12 months, we'll have a much better idea.
So can I ask you the next question in your advocate hat, because you have to be nicer to the legislature as a secretary. Why did it take us so long to do something that almost everybody in the transportation advocacy community believed was the right thing to do, and so many other major cities had done it before? Why the delay?
It's very difficult to fund something like this because of the size of the T, and we really needed the legislature, and especially this administration, to take that leap, put the money in the budget so that we could take that vote and know that we're going to be able to fund this. So I would say this administration really pushed the legislature on this.
You know, I want to talk about money because that's we've been talking about transportation on this show off and on for 25 years since we started, and at least to me as an outsider, the buck is almost always passed. Occasionally the needs of a particular year are met, but then I think, at least, you'll disabuse me if you disagree, heads go in the sand. Before we get to that, a topic came up the other day that the Globe did an editorial about. Phil Lang was kind enough to give us an hour a few days ago, the GM of the T, answering all questions, which, based upon some of his predecessors, I think is a great act of transparency, even if people don't agree with everything he says or does. And a caller asked him about the issue of late night service, which we know has been tried and then undone for a variety of reasons. Here's part of what the GM had to say.
I have been talking with my operations folks regarding the potential for later night service. One of the things I'd like to do is see how we can improve, as I think I mentioned earlier, off-peak service in general. The frequencies, whether it's midday late night. I think those areas are something I need to look at and I want to look at. I come from a system that was 24/7, and I also know that maybe the ridership is not as strong during those periods, but those people that use the system during those periods do it because they need to.
You know, one of the things the Globe editorial mentioned that I'm sure you care deeply about is the equity issue. A lot of low-wage workers working in restaurants, things like that, don't have a car, can't afford a ride-share thing after the T shuts down. I think it's at 12:30. Where is this in your mind in terms of the possibility of, would it be a third go or whatever it is, another try at late night service?
This is something, I think the GM hit on this. We have to do a lot of research on this. As you know, this has been tried numerous times, and I think you hit on this. This general manager is very transparent. The other thing is this general manager is on the system and actually talking to riders. I think when you combine that with the work that our planning teams can do, we'll get a better idea if this is something that is feasible in the future.
What's your perspective on? I understand obviously the T's have to be crossed, the I's dotted, the funding found, but as a concept, is this something that's on your priority list?
I think for me, more access and more options is always at the top of my list. How we do that, that's what we have to put that time in for. But anything we can do to give people the option of being able to get to work, get home, get to recreational activities, and not use a single occupancy vehicle, that is always my number one priority.
You know, you mentioned Phil Lang is on the T all the time. You took a little heat a few months ago for not being on the commuter rail from your hometown, driving your state-owned, financed EV, and you took criticism, which, by the way, in the spirit of full disclosure, Marty and I echoed, for not riding a line that is one of the lines that you have responsibility for. Have you since, and what's your take on the criticism and whether you should be doing it?
I have. And I think the thing that's really important to point out, I don't live within an MBTA service area. My community is not served by the MBTA. We are served by a regional transit authority, Montechusett, which is what I use. And around my community, I also use the Worcester RTA. And I think that really talks about regional equity. And I think for a secretary, I am one of the few that have not lived within the MBTA service area.
You know, I have to say, just stay on this just for a second. Marjorie Egan asked Charlie Baker about not riding the T a few years ago when he was governor. And I think I'm being fair to the governor. He was really aggravated by the question. And here's a little piece of what Baker said to us. This is 2019.
I rode the commuter rail for a lot of years. I rode the T for a lot of years. I talk to people all the time who ride the public transportation system. And I'm not a virtue signaler, I guess is what I would say. I think my job is to try and make the thing better. Ooh. And given what we inherited on that thing, I'll put our record up against any of our predecessors.
Do you regret not having done it up front? I mean, it seems to me, even if it's, as you describe, maybe not in your catchment area or whatever, you are the leader of the transportation system, and it does send a message if you ride, if you don't ride, particularly when there are a lot of unhappy people. No? Is that a fair criticism?
Here's the thing I will say. I've only lived in a community outside of the MBTA district for 4 years. Mm-mm. The previous almost 15, I used the public transit system every single day. I never drove, whether to go to work, whether to go to school, recreation, never. Until I moved outside of that service area, that's all I used.
How do you take criticism, by the way? I don't know you well enough to know. How do you, when you're in a high-profile place, you've been an advocate, as Shirley said before, and all of a sudden you're on the other side of the thing, and the same advocates, including some I'm sure you work shoulder to shoulder with, are criticized as a human, not as a. How do you react to that? How did you react to that?
I've been doing positions like this for a very long time. I got criticized on the board about different stances. It is my job to listen. And even listen whenever they're saying things that might not be particularly nice. It is a perspective, and it is important to me.
So one of your predecessors, Secretary Pollock, I remember she used to talk about taking all the modes. You know, she would drive, she would take the commuter rail, she'd take the subway. Do you find yourself doing that to check out all the modes? And I don't know if there's one mode that you're like, you know, this needs a lot more room for improvement. Maybe it's something that we haven't heard about.
There is no mode in the MBTA system that I've not used. Right. And for our RTAs, I've probably, out of the 15, used between 6 and 8 of them.
Regional transit?
Yep, regional transit authorities. My favorite mode is the boat.
The boat.
I love the boat. It is nowhere near where I live. I have no reason to ever be on the boat, but we took a ride on the Lynn Ferry. If I could move to use that, I would literally do anything.
So, Monica Tibbits-Nutt, can we talk about this task force? Because it was the statement I made before unfair that legislatures, they occasionally deal with the year in front of them because it's a crisis, but they have rarely, at least in my 30-plus years here, confronted the big problem on transportation funding. Is that a fair statement, would you say?
I don't think it's unique. I think that's the big thing. In the United States, it's not unique. The budget from every fiscal year to the next fiscal year, you really do need to focus on that, because if you look at the projects we're doing, they don't come up every year.
Okay, but this task force that was appointed by the governor that I think you co-chair, am I right about this?
Yes.
On funding, which has an end-of-the-year reporting date. Could you tell us what the mandate was, what it's supposed to do, what it is doing? Is the report going to be on time? What's the deal?
We were put together as part of an executive order, and this was really to tackle what you've been talking about for a long time. How do we fund beyond a fiscal year? How do we look out to the next 10, 20, 30 years? And this governor tasked this group with putting together every possible option there is, looking internationally, nationally, how have other systems, how have other states paid for their transportation? And that's what we build into this toolkit. And we will deliver that by December 31. And then that really is for the legislature, for the administration to take that information and then make their decisions from there.
Can you also talk a little bit more about the MBTA?
Oh, can we stay? I'm sorry. Can we stay on this just for
all right.
Is that about
it's the fiscal cliff?
Oh, go. Shoot.
The MBTA fiscal cliff. I mean, that's something that's staring at you right away. I mean, it's not long term. So how are you looking to resolve that? That's coming up.
We've had a fiscal cliff for decades. This is a very high number, but every time someone talks about this, it happens every single year. What we're doing is the work of the task force, but also working with the GM to look for every efficiency that is possible. And I think anyone that has witnessed the work he's doing, he's bringing more people onto the system, he's making a much more efficient system. And by the end of this year, we're gonna have those options, which we haven't had before.
But the difference right now is that far few people are riding the subway and rails because of the hybrid workplace. So you can't, how do you work around that?
More people are coming back.
Yeah,
They're coming back into the office.
Right.
And we continue to work with those employers, with those educational institutions to help push them to encourage their employees, their students to use it. The other thing the GM has done a great job is actually working with those employers to get reduced fares for their employees. That will get people on the system. Even if it's not every day, taking those cars off the road 1, 2, 3 days a week is going to make a difference for everyone commuting, independent of what your mode is.
But just so we understand the numbers, we asked Philip Eng this the other day. We had some minor disagreement. I thought I had read that on the T itself, we're only at 51% of pre-COVID ridership. Is that right, or did I underestimate it?
Depends on the mode.
Yeah. So what does that mean? Can you flesh that out a little?
So commuter rail is about 94%. Some of the other modes are less. That 50 to 60 is an average across the board, which is actually a little bit higher than the national average.
Can we get back to the task force for a second? I don't want to dwell on history, just say I'm sure everybody remembers you at a speech mentioned one of the things should be looking at tolls on the New Hampshire border. The governor, I think it's fair to say, chasing you. But then when she came here a few days later, and one of us, Marjorie, I said, why should anything be off the list? She said, oh, it isn't. Everything is on the list. That can stay on the list too. Is there any direction from above, meaning from the governor's office, from legislative leaders saying, do not put X on this list. It has no chance on Beacon Hill. It's going to put me in a political tough spot. Or do you have the level of independence that I think the taxpayer would like you to have?
The governor has made a firm statement that tolls are off the table. Every other option will be in that toolkit. And then from there, what they want to trim, that's really going to be up to the legislature and the administration.
For whatever it's worth, I mean, obviously it matters much more what she says to you. She did say to us right after that incident that everything is on the table, including those, but obviously subsequently she has said something else. And how detailed, there's been criticism from some advocates as well that well, I don't even know if there are recommendations. What comes out of this task force is going to be more list-like rather than comprehensive and detailed. Is that true or is that not true?
It is going to be comprehensive and detailed. It's not just a list of the options, but also talking about what the financial implications would be, what the equity implications would be. And this is looking across the entire transportation system. So when you talk about bridges, when you talk about roads, all of that is included. This report is going to be lengthy.
So as you know, I'm a devout Fairmont line.
You love the Fairmont
line writer. I also I'm growing. I'm coming back to the red line. So, but I also drive too. And I want to speak on behalf of drivers too. There is so much traffic. There is so much congestion. I mean, do you experience that? And what are you doing to address the traffic?
When I commute on the roadway, I'm on Route 2 and the Pike. I feel your pain. What we're doing is we're monitoring it. We're looking at the causes of this. Is this an intersection issue? Do we need to be diverting people to other roadways? Mainly focus on how are we getting people out of their cars. And that is the biggest focus. It's going to make the biggest impact. The other thing is getting people living closer to where they work. And that's really where you get that intersection of transportation and housing.
One of the solutions, remember New York City almost had congestion pricing until the governor pulled out the rug about a minute and a half before it was about to start. Right after that happened, we asked Mayor Wu about it and whether she'd consider it for Boston or would support it from Boston. And she said, we can't do that until the T is fixed. Essentially, I'm paraphrasing what she said. We need an option for people if we're going to put something like that in place. Governor Baker wouldn't even consider a pilot, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. Where are you on congestion pricing, and do you agree with her analysis that until the T is doing better and ridership is better and it's more efficient, that we can't do congestion pricing?
Congestion pricing is going to be in the toolkit. It has to be. This is something that many people have pursued, I think, more successfully internationally. When she's talking about the concerns about congestion pricing ahead of the T, I am in agreement on equity. You have to make sure that people have other options and not be punitive if people have no choice but to drive.
Okay, you're about to go. What's the one thing that keeps you up at night in your first year? Tell the truth. What's the one thing that's driving you the most nuts, so to speak, about your job or the task in front of you?
I would say, honestly, my commute is probably the thing that keeps me up at night.
It's all about me, isn't it always?
Wait. Why? Explain. How so?
It's one of those things where it is a lab for me. I am out there. I get to experience the things that people are complaining about. Yes. And so for me, every morning is spent either listening to something like the Big Dig podcast and trying to make myself feel better about my job.
Peabody Award winner, GBH.
Exactly.
Yes, go ahead.
Love it. Or I'm thinking about, okay, what other transit options could we put here? Where are the places we could develop housing? And that really, truthfully, is the stuff I think about and keeps me up.
We're about to run out of time, but the question that Ian Coss asked at the beginning, and the question he wanted to address in the 9-part wonderful Big Dig was, can we still do big things? How do you answer that question?
Absolutely.
You do? You think that we're not poisoned or whatever it is by the rising costs and mistrust in government? You think we can do it?
We have $3 billion of federal grants in 1 year. We can do big projects.
We're doing the bridge. We're fixing at least some of the bridges.
What do you mean we? You doing the damn bridge? What are you doing?
Massachusetts.
Did you apply to work for us?
I didn't.
Let me tell you, I would not hire her. That's all I can say. Secretary, we really appreciate your time and hope you come back soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, we've just been hearing from Monica Tibbits-Nutt.
The new boss of Shirley Leung, apparently.
She's the Secretary and CEO of the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. I feel your pain because your commute is stressful because you're not just stressed out by the traffic, but you're thinking about how can I make this commute better for everybody, right? She just said absolutely. So after a quick break, all day we've been soliciting your texts on this question around who gets to keep the engagement ring when the engagement falls apart. We'll read your texts next. They're really, really good. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH live from the BPL and streaming online at youtube.com at GBH News.
College campuses are the latest front in America's culture war.
The professors are the enemy.
It is like a tinderbox, and it could ignite, especially around the election as we get closer to that.
We will not stop! We will not! I'm Kurt Carapezza from GBH News. And I'm John Marcus from the Hechinger Report. The new season of our podcast, College Uncovered, is out now, and we're tackling the politics of college education. Listen today wherever you get your podcast.
Support for our programs comes from you And the Boston Speakers Series, with its new season starting soon at Symphony Hall. 7 evenings featuring Liz Cheney, Supreme Court correspondent Nina Totenberg, and historian Annette Gordon-Reed. Information at bostonspeakersseries.org. And Comcast, offering Xfinity Internet, designed to provide a connection for home networks so everyone can be online at once, even during peak hours. More information at xfinity.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Shirley Leung sitting in for Marjorie. I'm Jim Browdy, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Diamonds might be forever, but not every relationship is bound to stand the test of time. Often couples who get engaged don't even make it to the altar. Some estimates say 1 in 5 engaged couples won't end up saying I do. So for those 1 in 5, which partner is entitled to keep, if there is one, an expensive engagement ring? That's a question before the state's highest court in a case involving a $70,000 engagement ring. Yesterday, we talked about asking your guests to pay to attend your wedding, like buy a ticket. All day, we've been soliciting your texts, asking who should be allowed to keep the ring as a connection to yesterday's Am I the A-hole? How do we get to the point where engagement rings cost more than the average annual income in the United States? What are the texters saying, Shirley Leung?
Wow, people have so many opinions.
What do they say?
And they're so
Wow.
good.
What are they saying?
All right, I've loved Cheryl in Boston. If they can afford a $70,000 engagement ring, I honestly don't really care about their issues. They're in an entirely different category of life stressors.
I like that. What else?
That is good. All right, this is another one. Meredith in Rochester. The answer to the $70,000 engagement ring seems very straightforward to me. If a breakup occurs before the wedding, the right and gracious thing to do is return the ring. If the breakup occurs after the wedding, it's hers, all hers. And so under this scenario, the breakup happened before the wedding, right? And so I guess she would have to return the ring.
Well, there's another text that I thought was perfect. The story in the Globe, which I thought was very interesting. Apparently, the settled law is in the state on everything but one issue. The law in Massachusetts says broken promises around weddings are not actionable, meaning you can't file a lawsuit. The woman in this situation who has the engagement ring has filed her argument in this case before the SJC isn't it interesting that the only law around engagements that allows you to sue is one around return of the ring. Who benefits from the return of the ring 9 times out of 10? The man.
The guy.
So here's my favorite text from Mike in Arlington. This is why the exchange of rings for engagement should be mutual. Each partner gives the other a ring. That's what my spouse and I did, as well as 2 other couples I know of. But there's still the problem of the inflated and totally market-driven high prices of diamond jewelry. We didn't use diamonds. Isn't that the solution? It should be a mutual exchange rather than, in most cases, not all, a man-to-woman kind of experience. No?
Yeah, I like that. You know,
She doesn't like that. I can tell that. She's just thinking about going to work for the tea, so she's preoccupied. Go ahead, Shirley.
Well, I was thinking, what would I do? I think the solution might be maybe the man sells the ring, and then they just split the proceeds.
That's possible.
She
She doesn't want to give it back at all. She says she's entitled to it. He gave it to her. I'm keeping it.
Because they had a relationship, and so like they could split it.
How do you feel on the underlying issue? Well, not the underlying issue, not the issue before the court, but the whole issue. I mean, again, if you have $70,000 and you choose to spend it, you're entitled to do that. But how does that strike you that somebody spends more than the average annual income in the United States on an engagement ring? How does that strike you?
Well, it depends on how much money he has. I mean, what if he's like a billionaire? So
Yikes.
$70,000 is nothing, right?
But I know, but it isn't a question of affordability for him in this case. It's a question of it just feels a little icky, doesn't it?
It does feel a little icky, but I was wondering how much. I was wondering if we ever saw a picture of the ring. I can't remember.
Did you get an engagement ring?
I did.
How much it cost?
It was not $70,000.
If it hadn't happened, would you have given it back?
Help fund the news and reporting you trust by donating your old car, truck, boat, or other vehicle to GBH. Learn more about our vehicle donation program online at gbh.org/vehicle donation.
Support for GBH comes from you and Mass General Brigham Health Plan. Ranked #1 in member satisfaction among commercial health plans in Massachusetts by J.D. Power for the 2nd consecutive year. Details at mgbhp.org/everyday. And
United States through something called the de minimis exemption. That means those imports are not subject to taxes. But the White House says that system has been abused. A decade ago, about 140 million shipments were coming through this exemption. Now it's more than a billion. The administration wants to make sure any imports covered by existing tariffs on Chinese goods are not being exempted through this de minimis rule. The White House seems to be specifically trying to crack down on Chinese e-commerce platforms like Shein and Temu, known for selling cheap fast fashion. Asma Khalid, NPR News.
One of Boeing's largest unions is officially on strike. The Machinists Union voted overwhelmingly yesterday to reject a tentative contract agreement. NPR's Joel Rose reports it's the latest setback for the aerospace giant.
The vote by the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers was not close, with 94% voting to reject the contract and 96% authorizing the strike. The deal would have raised wages by 25%, lowered employees' share of healthcare costs, and boosted retirement contributions by the company. But many of the union's 33,000 members were not happy with that offer, which fell short of the 40% raise and pension change.
Not just about Africa. It's about African voices being heard on a whole series of issues. The council deals with the world, and so it would bring African leadership into the fray on issues import to the entire world.
Singer and actor Justin Timberlake's pleaded guilty to a lesser charge in connection to his driving while intoxicated arrest in the Hamptons over the summer. He had a court hearing today, and he was ordered to make a public safety announcement.
I try to hold myself to a very high standard for myself, and this was not that.
At his hearing, he agreed to up to 40 hours community service. This is NPR News.
With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Craig Lamolt. The governor's office announced this week that 47 school districts across Massachusetts will be receiving federal funding to support students who are homeless or living in shelters. New Bedford Public Schools got the most funding at $125,000. At a recent city council meeting, Councilor Shane Burgos spoke about New Bedford's homelessness issue.
A total of 373 adults and children who are identified as being homeless, 67 of whom were living on the streets. 67.
Lynn and Lowell Public Schools received the second most funding with grants of $85,000 each. The funding will provide for support services and family outreach at the district level. Several Boston city councilors are asking the state to intervene in the Boston Public Schools late bus issue. City councilors Ed Flynn and Aaron Murphy are calling for the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education to conduct a detailed probe of BPS transportation. That would include an evaluation of scheduling, routing, and operational practices, along with developing an action plan for the district to resolve problems. It comes as the city council also recently passed a motion to hold a hearing on the issue. No word on a date yet. The district says that bus lateness has worsened this year as schools adjust to a new GPS tracking app that was originally intended to make buses faster. Sunny today, high around 80, mostly clear tonight, going down to the low 60s. And a nice weekend, sunny and in the upper 70s on Saturday, more sun and only slightly cooler in the mid 70s on Sunday. Sox take on the Yankees tonight in the Bronx. First pitch is at 7:05.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Schwab, with Schwab investing themes like artificial intelligence, renewable energy, or pet passion. Over 40 themes to invest in. Learn more at schwab.com. And the Doris Duke Foundation.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I am Jim Browdy. Shirley Leung, Boston Globe business columnist, is sitting in for Marjorie, who still has COVID. We hope she'll be back Monday and is doing well. We are streaming from the library at youtube.com/GBH News. Join now on Zoom for another edition of On the Docket by retired federal judge Nancy Gertner, senior lecturer at Harvard Law School and a BPR contributor. I just warn you, I believe, by looking at her, she is at the same location where she alleged that a squirrel ate the modem a few months ago, and her segment was cut short, so cross your fingers. Hello, Judge Gertner. How are you?
Hello, it's been fixed.
That's what you say.
Oh, that's great.
They tell the squirrel that or not?
I didn't mention it.
Okay.
Wait, how did the squirrel get in?
I have a, it's not in the cabinet. I have a line from the main house connecting my study, my shed, my she shed, to the main house.
She shed.
And some animals started chewing it.
Oh, wow.
So she says.
Oh, wow. So, Judge Gertner, we were dealing with a legal question just before you got on air. This was about who gets a case that's, I think, headed to
it's at the SJC.
Who gets the $70,000 diamond engagement ring if the engagement gets called off? What's your take on this?
I have no idea. This is a case. The question is whether if the engagement is called off, the ring should be returned to the man.
Yeah.
Yes. There's a lawsuit over this. And there was never a wedding. There's no wedding.
Right. One hell of an engagement ring. I haven't the foggiest idea.
She doesn't have the foggiest idea. That's exactly what Clarence Thomas said in a case recently. In any case, so Nancy Gertner, you've, I believe it's fair to say, not a huge fan of the current Attorney General, Merrick Garland. And I don't mean as a person, but in terms of performance. We all have heard Donald Trump talk about weaponization of the justice system as recently as the debate the other night. Merrick Garland decided it was time to speak to his employees and fight back. Here's Trump and then a little bit of Garland.
It's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department.
We will not allow this nation to become a country where law enforcement is treated as an apparatus of politics.
Two things, Nancy Gertner. One, the underlying issue, the attack on the justice system and individual judges and prosecutors. And two, how you think the Attorney General Garland addressed it.
The attack is ridiculous. The attack is truly ridiculous. There are two ways of looking at all the cases against Trump. One is the way he's looking at it, which is to say weaponization. The other is to say he has actually done real criminality, and it's about time that the justice system recognized that. In other words, his escape in prior years is a function of people not wanting to take him on, and now they finally did. It doesn't make any sense. The state cases, were certainly not, controlled by the Democratic Party. No one whispered in Fannie Willis's ears. No one whispered in Bragg's ears. That is to say, to bring these charges. They brought these charges and brought them before a grand jury in each case. In the Bragg case in New York, a jury found Trump guilty. If anything, the Department of Justice has been so scrupulous that legitimate prosecutions have been delayed because Garland did not want to immediately go after Trump. Now, again, going after Trump for attempting to overturn an election is not, choosing to go after someone for driving, on the wrong side of the road. These were serious charges and seriously contended with. I think that Garland, in fact, has been too timid. The story, at least the reporting, is that he chose not to bring any charges immediately after he took over the Department of Justice, didn't even want to investigate Trump. And again, the reporting suggested it was the January 6th committee of the House that really called the question and finally pushed him to do this. By that point, the amount of time that courts attempting to be fair have given to Trump's challenges have led to these charges not being brought before the election. So the Department of Justice, it seems to me, has not remotely been weaponized because the charges are real and substantial and troubling and should be something for which Trump be held accountable. Weaponization is, as if you have this is a bad way to put it, a trumped up charge.
I mean, what I find really amazing about Trump's comments is that, it's so rich that he said this, because hasn't he been saying that when I'm elected president, I'm going to throw all these people in jail, right? If I'm elected, if they try to go after me. So I don't know why he said this at all. And I agree with you, Judge Gertner. I feel like all his charges they've been fair game.
Well, the thing about Trump, which is actually quite smart, is that he invariably takes those accusations and then implements them. It's like in other words, Project 2025 is talking about really weaponizing the Department of Justice, replacing civil servants who, whatever you think of them, are actually barred from participating in political activities, replacing them with political appointees. So Trump's response to the argument that all these prosecutions were weaponized against him, an argument which has no basis, is to go ahead and seek to try to, in fact, change the prosecution so that he can control them, so that they will be tilted in his direction.
We're talking to former federal judge Nancy Gardner. I think we'll all agree that one of Trump's great skills is to take both sides of an issue within a very short period of time. Here's Donald Trump first endorsing mail-in voting and then excoriating mail-in voting. Here he is.
It's time to start thinking about let's vote. So important. This will be the most important election in the history of our country. So whether it's mail-in ballots, early voting, voting on the day, you got to get out and vote. It's very simple. We want to get rid of mail-in voting.
It is really almost comical, except that it's about voter suppression. And the reason we brought it on the agenda today is one of the tactics of the Republican Party is clear, at least in my estimation, is clearly a voter suppression. What the GOP is doing in a number of swing states, including Pennsylvania, is suing to ensure they hope that unless every technicality on a mail-in ballot is met, the ballot's got to be thrown out. For example, some states require that a mail-in ballot be put in a separate envelope. The separate envelope be signed by a witness, that the witness put their proper address, their date, which of course has no relevance to the underlying thing, but their position is the strict interpretation of law is critical, and the reason they have this position is because the overwhelming majority of mail-in ballots happen to come from Democrats. Where do the courts usually stand on these technicality issues, which, at least in my estimation, don't attack the integrity of the vote, Judge Gertner?
Well, so far, courts have held, now again, these are state court issues. So far, courts have held that these are, just as you've described it, minor technicalities that don't go to the core of the legitimacy of the ballot. But what's going on is a multi-front war in state after state, and particularly the swing states, to challenge this. And so all you need is one court to go in the other direction. That's the problem, because our elections are determined by, state procedures. And so although the overwhelming majority of courts, in my view, have said, the date on the ballot and technical issues should not be enough to throw out the vote, Trump's legal team is trying to go to state after state, actually just the swing states, to get the one judge who will throw it out, and that could spell the difference between success and failure.
But let me be clear, even though these are state issues, are there relevant constitutional issues that could allow an appeal? Let's assume the votes are in. It's November 5th. I believe it's by 8 o'clock that every mail-in ballot, even if not counted, has to be submitted. Could a challenge to those mail-in ballots, particularly if their number exceeds the margin for the person who's not suing, let's assume Harris wins by 1,000 votes and there are 2,000 mail-in ballots, are there any constitutional issues that could bring it to the Supreme Court? And the reason I ask is not just because I'm interested, but because that could delay the declaration of who the President of the United States is, potentially for months.
Well, and people, all of us who are commentators and people who write and speak about constitutional law don't know the answer anymore about what the Supreme Court could do, because the immunity decision was so shocking. But there really is, the question, there's an open question about whether there's a constitutional right to vote that is enforceable by the federal courts. And so could the Supreme Court review this? Sure, because the Supreme Court seems to be willing to reach for anything. Should the Supreme Court reach it? No. But who knows is the answer. Certainly issues with respect to racial disparity fit under the Voting Rights Act, whatever's left of the Voting Rights Act. And what we have found is that Trump's challenges have been focused on cities, big urban centers where there's a larger percentage of minority voters. So with respect to that, there could be an argument that the enforcing technical rules in large urban centers in swing states it has the purpose and effect of diluting the minority vote. And that would mean not that if Trump, I mean, that's something that the people who want these things to be treated as a technicality could raise. But if a judge in Georgia, for example, says that that the fact that the date is wrong on the document is enough to invalidate the document, then it seems to me the voter, likely to be a person of color, given where they are bringing these cases, could certainly make a voting rights claim. And that would go up the chain to the Supreme Court.
Talking to Nancy Gertner, former federal judge, now at Harvard.
Can we? Can we talk about Elon Musk?
You can talk about whatever you want.
I love this clip about Elon Musk. What this is a clip about Trump's interview with Elon Musk, and he talks about where he'll go if he loses the election.
And again, I told you that crime rates all over the world are going way down, which makes sense. In fact, the next time what we'll do is if something happens with this election, which would be a horror show, we'll meet the next time in Venezuela because it'll be a far safer place to meet than our country, okay? So we'll go, you and I will go, and we'll have a meeting and dinner in Venezuela.
I was just thinking how for Trump, the election is quite high stakes. He either is president or he could go to jail.
That is correct.
And so
that is
and I was thinking, I guess it sounds like he will go to Venezuela. Judge Gertner, could that happen? Could he go to Venezuela and escape all his potential prosecution?
No extradition treaty with Venezuela, by the way.
Yes, he could do that. And that's why there's an issue that some have raised about whether Judge Chutkan, as a condition of bail, for him in the January 6th case in D.C. should take away his passport.
What would you do? I mean, by the way, I assume if there was a hearing, he would do what he did at the debate the other night when I think it was David Muir asked him about his comment in that podcast, I lost by a whisker. He said, obviously, I was being sarcastic. I was joking. And I assume that'd be his response. But it's for the judge to determine. What would you do if you had this case and he made a comment like that I'll be in Venezuela? He's got sentencing awaiting him in one court, state court, and he's got indictments pending in federal courts. What would you do?
I'd take away his passport.
Would you really?
Yeah, you're holding the passport. The standard is, given his wealth and that passport, he has the ability to go anywhere in the world. And that comment plus his resources and the passport would suggest that they should, in fact, hold his passport. He can say that he was only joking. It would be up to the judge to determine. But the standard, there are the conditions imposed on bail that are not, the standard is a relatively low standard, what you think will secure someone's attendance at trial. And if you think that there is a risk, and that's all you need is a risk, then you take his passport.
So would you not consider, it seems to me there are two options for a responsible judge like you were, either take his passport or let him keep his passport and give him a one-way ticket funded by the court. Is that something you'd consider or no?
No.
Okay.
It's a great idea, but
Thank
no.
you. Okay. Judge Gertner, we talked yesterday to Paul Reville, the former Secretary of Education, about the fallout from the affirmative action decision from the Supreme Court. And as you know, particularly elite universities are beginning to report on their freshman applications and acceptance rates. And a bunch of schools, Harvard, BU, Amherst, MIT, have seen drops in enrollment of black first-year students. At BU yesterday, we read, is down from 9% to 3%. A couple of universities, Princeton and Yale, are actually fairly level, which is odd. But the question is not about the declining numbers. The question relates to everybody we've spoken to in the education area that was troubled by the affirmative action decision, which is everybody we've spoken to, says the goal is to craft something that would pass Supreme Court muster. And I wanted your opinion on what might. For example, one of the things we discussed yesterday with Paul Reville is the provision in Texas where the top 10% graduates of every single high school in the state are admitted to, I guess it's the University of Texas.
Schools.
The state schools, thank you. And much to my amazement, Clarence Thomas has said he thinks that's a good race-neutral method rather than what he considers to be the discrimination of affirmative action. Is that something, or is there something else, socioeconomic factors, that you think would not cause the Supreme Court to strike it down as sort of a brazen attempt to circumvent their decision?
Well, no, I think that would actually work. And and I think that there's an interesting question, right? On the one hand, there have been challenges to legacy admissions, and the notion that legacy admissions, particularly by now, could mean allowing wealthy people of color to be admitted, students to be admitted, and whether or not, on the one hand, that is important to the mix in the school, but on the other hand, you're leaving out people for whom going to Harvard College or Yale would make an even greater difference than someone who has the money to be a legacy admission. So, quite apart from whether it gets around the affirmative action ruling, it really wouldn't be a bad thing to do. One could, for example, in Boston, take the valedictorians or the top 5 or 10 from public schools on the theory that they are good students and should be admitted. And yes, socioeconomic issues would be a measure as well. Your question to me suggested that this was a cover to increase African American admissions.
That's what I intended in the question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one way of looking at it. I mean, the other way of looking at it is that it's actually a way of introducing racial and economic diversity, which isn't a bad thing. It's not a bad thing at all. I mean, for example, my father of Gartner floor covering would drive me to Barnet College in the Gartner floor covering truck until I told him that he had to stop a few blocks away because I was in fact a first generation in college.
Oh, wow.
First generation in college. So that's not a bad thing, to be able to get that kind of mix. I think there's something I've said on the air before, which is the affirmative action debate, in my view, got waylaid 20 years ago. Originally, it was seen as essentially reparations. In other words, to deal with generational wealth that was for whites and not for blacks, not because of anything anyone did this generation, but because of redlining and discrimination. And so it was, in fact, to make up for past harms to the black population. Somewhere along the line, the courts thought and the litigators thought that the better argument was diversity. And diversity, to some degree, is important, but a less coherent argument. So the Supreme Court had said in previous rulings, well, what about Asians? What about Samoans? What about this and that? If it's diversity, then every group has a claim to being in college. And that's true and a good thing, but it's not the same thing as the initial rationale for affirmative action.
Talking to a former federal judge, Nancy Gardner.
Yeah, I was really struck by how low the BU and Northeastern, low single digits, how much they had dropped. And I wonder if, as we look at more schools begin to report in the Boston area, I wonder if it had something to do with, Boston's history. I wonder if more maybe a lot of prospective black students, maybe they don't want to.
But Boston's history existed before the Supreme Court decision.
Right, but another reason not to come here. I just wondered. I wondered out loud. I don't know. I just hope that the schools here take a deeper look at why our numbers are failing here in Massachusetts versus, I think Duke went up. In terms of black
and
enrollment.
As I said, Princeton and Yale are flat. So in any case, and if you have a Princeton and a Yale graduate right here, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
I wonder whether part of the issue here is schools overreacting to make certain that they then would not be sued.
That's probably true too.
Well, it's sort of like companies retreating on DEI the first opportunity they have, even before they're sued or barely threatened, except by some Republican attorneys general. And they use the opportunity to do what, at least in my opinion, they wanted to do all along, which was retreat. Nancy Gardner, we only have a couple minutes left, but I wanted to ask you one last thing. We all know that the sentencing in the New York situation was put off till November by Judge Merchan. But we also know that in light of the redrafting of the indictments by Jack Smith The case, January 6th case, is now back in front of Judge Shutkin, but the difference is not, and by the way, the redrafting of the indictments was to attempt to have them comport with the Supreme Court ruling on immunity. I believe you said just a couple of weeks ago you thought, based on what you knew, that he had crafted them in such a way that they should be okay. But we won't know for a while. The first briefs, I believe, are supposed to be filed by the prosecutors, Jack Smith, special counsel, on September 26th. And even though a lot of us are very disappointed the American people will not have an outcome of a trial prior to voting, is there a decent chance that we'll know a lot more about what the special counsel thinks Donald Trump did in violation of law in that filing? Or is it going to be one of those circumspect kind of things? I know it's speculative, but what's your take on this, Judge?
Well, I think he has to be clear. I don't think it can be circumspect. I mean, and I think it's not for the public necessarily. I mean, he has to do that for the judge. He has to say that, you know, when Trump called Pence, this is alleged in the indictment, he was not calling Pence as president to vice president. He was calling Pence as presidential candidate to vice presidential candidate. And they were talking about things that had simply no legitimate role in Pence's work. It was completely ministerial. He was a bureaucrat. He simply had to stand up there and certify the votes. So I think it will be very clear. And the reason I think it'll be very clear is if they want a quick, you know, ruling, then they have to make it very clear. By the way, I want to get back to the engagement ring.
Please.
Yes. You have it. You have an opinion. You have a decision. You have a ruling.
I don't have a decision, but it is a state law issue, and most states see an engagement ring as a conditional gift. I'm giving you an engagement ring on the condition that we're going to get married. And if we don't get married, I had to get it back. I don't know what Massachusetts is going to do because that is very much a state law issue. The majority rule is what I just described.
So, but yeah, what do you think? Just forget about the law, forget about your judge. How do you feel about this?
I think you give the engagement ring back. I mean, personally, I think that it's that's the fair thing to do. Whether in fact the law mirrors that is another question.
Judge Gertner, we hope you study up on that important issue before we see you next time. And congratulations on fending off this squirrel. We really appreciate it. Take care of yourself, Judge Nancy Gertner. Thanks so much.
We've been speaking with the retired federal judge Nancy Gertner. She's a senior lecturer at Harvard Law School and a BPR contributor. And after a quick break, a piece out of, yet again, another Globe piece. This is by Kara Baskin.
It's a great piece.
She grapples with disappointment for kids and parents when their little ones don't make the cut for school or Little League sports teams. We want to know how you parents have navigated this very real part of life for your kids, as well as your own stories of sports and rejection. That's next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, Taylor Swift endorses Kamala Harris, prompting political analysts and pollsters to parse what the pop star's influence will be on the presidential election. From there, we remember James Earl Jones's magisterial voice and masterwork on the stage and screen. And the Museum of Modern Art's director is the latest in a string of leaders stepping down, radically altering the arts landscape. That and more on The Culture Show's Week in Review, today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And The Huntington, presenting Tom Stoppard's Leopoldstadt, a stirring and epic story of love, family, and enduring bravery set in Vienna at the rise of the 20th century. September 12th through October 13th at the Huntington Theater, huntingtontheater.org. And MIT Federal Credit Union, helping members achieve their financial goals with savings account options, including high-yield money market accounts. Memberships open to the general public. More at mitfcu.org, federally insured by NCUA.
Let me try it a third time. Welcome back to Boston Public Radio, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. I hope you figured out by now Marjorie is not here. She still has some COVID symptoms. We're hoping for Monday. Shirley Leung, business columnist from the Globe, is here. Speaking of the Globe, Kara Baskin wrote a great piece. So your kid was cut from the team. What now, she wrote. For a lot of kids, their first real taste, I guess, of true disappointment comes at school when they're passed over for extracurriculars. You know, a sports team, spot in the band, orchestra, roles in a school play. Until the end of the show, we want to hear from the parents out there or the kids or kids who became parents who suffered as a kid. If you're willing to share your thoughts at 877-301-8970, you can call or text. Have you been a parent who's had to comfort your kid who came up short? How are they doing now? What advice do you have to impart to anxious parents listening with kids currently trying out to play soccer, football, some other team thing where some of them are just not going to make the team? And have you been the kid on the other end of this whose hopes didn't end up lining up with the reality? How did it shape who you are today? I ask that because there's some people in Kara's story who 40 years later are saying it's one of the most traumatic experiences of their life, even decades later. And do you have advice for the kids making their way through this anxious period, missing out on the spot on the team? Again, call or text 877-301-8970. Are both your kids basketball players?
One of the 11-year-old, the 6th grade, is a basketball player, and we've been doing, town travel since 4th grade, and we've done AAU since 4th grade as well. So I know a lot about these youth sports.
So what kind of anxiety as a parent, and also what kind of anxiety does your kid have about, am I going to make it, am I not going to make it, am I going to sit on the bench, whatever?
Well, I think it's very different when you get to high school. I think it is quite traumatic if you don't make your high school sports team, because chances are you've spent years, right, since you were like 8 years old playing a sport and then you get cut. Now, we're not there yet, right, at high school level. And so, but, if I could play devil's advocate, we talk about this. I mean, when you're in the AAU, it's the private sports industrial complex. You're paying hundreds of dollars to play. And sometimes, you know what? Sometimes you want the best kids on your team. Sometimes you want them to cut some kids.
Oh my God. I mean, some other kids is
some
what you
other kids, because, the kids who are weaker, it's
weaker.
It's not good for them either, because they don't get as much playing time.
Yeah, I know you're really concerned about those kids.
They don't get as much playing time, and then
you want your kids' team to win. That's what you care about.
Exactly, that's true too. So I can, and so but there are plenty of places to play. You could play for Parks and Recs. There's a lot of opportunity to play.
Okay, let me tell you, I am not. By the way, I'm not one of those angry white guys who is angry at participation trophies. When a kid's really little, let everybody be part of the deal. As they get older, you lose a lot in life. You fail a lot in life. And it seems to me the job of the parent and the coach and the teacher, whatever, is to work with the kid, because obviously all of them, unless they're Jason Tatum or whoever they are going to fail at some point to make a team.
Failure is good.
I don't know if it's good, but you can learn a lot from it.
Right.
And so I have
to say. So
you
agree with me?
No, but let me tell you, since I've told the story before, but obviously you haven't heard it because I asked you about it before. You said it's particularly traumatic in high school. This was not traumatic for me at all, but it was incredible. My high school, I went to a high school in Philadelphia. It was very good in basketball. And my high school basketball coach, Art McNally, was actually head of the NFL officials, so he's a pretty big deal. Okay, so there are 15 players. I tried out for the team. 15 players left on the team. I was the 15th best, meaning the worst of the remaining people. And apologies, thank God Marjorie's not here, because she said, are you going to tell the story again? Yes, I am, one more time. So I was the 15th best. I wasn't cut. It's down to 14. I was the 14th best, meaning the worst. I wasn't cut. Final cut, I was finally cut as the 13th player. So I go to the coach afterwards, and I said, Coach, thank you for allowing me to be part of this. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot. And he said, I'm really sorry that we had to cut you. And I said, well, I wasn't going to bring it up, but since you brought it up, I wasn't surprised I was cut. I was surprised I lasted so long. And he said, if you really want to know the truth, and this is a verbatim quote from Art McNally, the high school basketball coach at Central High School in Philadelphia, the reason was because the coaches and I met and couldn't believe that somebody this big could be this bad. So I have to say,
you were entertainment.
I was not traumatized at all. And the reason I wasn't traumatized is because despite that comment, he was kind to me. He said to me, I'm really sorry you didn't make it. I really know you tried hard. And I'm sure I was disappointed. But this notion, I don't mean to disparage people because I know everybody has a different psychological makeup. But when I read Kara's story and you feel how, I think when a kid feels, we'll get to your calls in a second, by the way. When a kid feels totally devastated, it's because a parent hasn't done their job. They haven't prepared the kid for the fact, go out and have fun, try your hardest, work your hardest if that's what you want to do. And if you don't make it, you don't make it. You either try again later or you do something else, but at least try and have fun. Is that?
No, I think that's right. I mean, because as we all know, not everybody gets into the college they want to go to, or not everyone gets the job that they apply for, right? So you got to confront failure or at some point. And but again, you got to learn from your failure. I mean, there are lots of stories where people get cut from a high school sports team and they found another love.
Were you an athlete, by the way?
I mean, I wouldn't call myself an athlete.
But
I played high school sports.
You did?
Yeah, I played field hockey and I played tennis.
Oh, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and then I didn't. And then I would love to play tennis again. Actually, I'd love to play pickleball again.
Really?
Yeah, that's what I love, or at least I'd like to learn how to play.
See,
pickleball.
the problem is you're a normal-sized person. I am not. And when you're this big, the expectation is you're obviously good at everything. I was not really good at anything. I was better than average because I was so big, but I was not better than average because I had any talent, because I didn't. You
never play. How much? You didn't play a lot of basketball growing up?
I would say not a lot of basketball. I mean, before high school, I made teams, but I only made teams because I was the tallest kid. And so I assume they all felt the same way. By the way, an anonymous texter says, it's not always about me, my friend. Since Marjorie isn't here, who will mention Jim putting his foot through the boat? This is also true. I did try out for the crew team at the University of Pennsylvania, where I went to college, and it is true. And by the way, do you know these shells cost like thousands and thousands of dollars?
My 13-year-old's a rower.
Oh, really? Is that true?
He's trying to row.
The first thing the coach told us, Ted Nash was his name, who was legendary until he died and people found out he was a sexual abuser. Ted Nash said, you have to be really careful when you get in the boat because it's really thin and fragile. And the first time I got in the boat, I put my foot through it. So that was the end of my,
the end of your rowing
my
career?
shell career. And that, thank you for bringing that up. 877-301-8970. Again, we want to hear from parents. How do you prepare your kids? Has there been disappointment? And if you're a grown-up kid, how have you dealt with the fact that I assume all of you were cut from something? Where do you want to start, Shirley?
All right, let's start with Kevin from Warren.
Hey.
How you doing, guys?
Hi.
So I played Little League baseball, and I'm currently a baseball coach for my local town.
Great.
And my son's in it. And I think youth sports is much more important than they were when I was a kid. I think there should be more opportunities for kids to play in schools. AAU isn't hundreds of dollars. It's actually thousands of dollars for these travel teams. So a lot of people can't afford it. I think the battle of the computer and the screen is being won by parents who include their kids in youth sports. You can't be on a screen when you're playing a sport. Of course, with the varsity team, you're going to get cut if you don't make it. But there should be other opportunities that don't cost thousands of dollars for kids to participate in.
I wish I had said that, by the way. That's exactly what I was thinking this morning. You articulated it beautifully. If you can't make the first team or the varsity, you have another opportunity to play on a whatever level team that is fun and allows you to compete a little bit. Kevin, that was a great first call. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with him because it does seem all or nothing these days. Like my 13-year-old, he wants to play soccer, right? But he never played soccer since he was 5 years old. So I'm like, it's too late for you. You're done.
Said this to him?
Yes, you cannot. Well, he couldn't join.
It's too late for you. He's 13.
Because there's none of the leagues would take him. He would be laughed off the field because there's so many kids. I mean, we talk about the professionalization of youth sports, but it's true.
No, that's a beautiful job of mothering. Little boy, what's his name?
Ellis.
Ellis, you'll be laughed off the damn team. Okay, Ellis? You understand what I'm saying to you, my friend?
I just tell because I would love for him. I wish there were these kind of parks and recs.
Yeah, that's what this guy, it's what Kevin was talking about.
Right, there needs to be more of that. But even for my 13-year-old to join in Parks and Recs, it's too competitive already. Because what happens is, and I'm guilty of this with my basketball player, he plays multiple teams.
He does.
He plays the town travel team. He plays the Parks Recs team. Maybe he'll pick, and then he'll like segue into the AAU team. So you've got these.
Have you told him that he's a loser like you told your other kid or not?
Not yet.
Okay. By the way, an anonymous texter sort of has a different position on the same thing. My kid plays hockey. It eats up all my money and weekend sleep time. I wish he would get cut. I'd buy him a mini bike. I mean, don't you think a lot of parents feel, aren't you traveling all the time to these things?
Well, ice hockey parents that.
Like
I feel
4
bad
a.m. to get
6
rink time.
a.m. Yeah, that's incredible. He's right. I feel bad for the ice hockey parents, but some of these basketball weekend tournaments where you're playing game after game, some of us are like, I hope they lose because I don't want to go to the next game.
It's great. This is the most honest woman we've had on the show in weeks. Sarah in Danvers, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Hey there.
Hi. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
We love that. Thank you for calling.
Okay, so I have to agree with Jim that it is the parents' job to teach the kids really how to lose and also how to stick with something even if you're not the best.
That's great.
Right. An example is my son was, he excelled in academics and music, and he swam for years, and he stuck with it. And I remember his teacher saying, I worry a little bit about him. He's never going to have a chance to fail, before he gets to college. And I said, don't worry, he swims, and some of his swimmers, his teammates go to the nationals every year, and he doesn't. And so, but he stuck with it, and he ended up, swimming for Yale for 4 years. And I feel like all along, he never was one of these kids that was so upset because he didn't win or maybe he didn't do his best time. I mean, I feel like not to pat myself on the back, but I feel like it was our responsibility to say, you're not in this sport just to win. And people have different strengths, and it doesn't mean that you don't stick with it.
You sound like a great
success.
Great parent, great first call. Thank you, Sarah. Anonymous texter, Jim is discounting the fact that parents are just as invested. This is true. Mm-hmm. Therefore, they don't brace the kid for potential failure because they're equally invested and equally gutted when the kid gets cut. Another anonymous texter, kids need to learn and deal with how to lose and or deal with disappointment, something some politicians nowadays never learned. Excellent point. Thank you, Mr. or Ms. Anonymous. 877-301-8970.
Let's hear from Carol in Boston.
Hey, Carol.
Hi, how are you doing?
We're good.
We're good.
Thanks.
This is a really timely discussion, I have to say, because my son just got cut by his school's varsity soccer team.
Oh.
And we had some really hurtful conversations about it. I heard somebody earlier said that the parents didn't prep the kids well enough, just go out, have fun. My point is sometimes, regardless of what the parents say, the kids want to play for their school.
Sure.
They set their expectations so high, and they try so hard trying to represent their school. When they get cut, it's a cut on their confidence, and it's really hit them hard. So regardless of how parents you prep your kids, when that moment comes and they cry in the parking lot of the school, it is really heartbreaking for the parents as well. But I do agree that the kids need to learn from their failure. This is not necessarily a bad experience because they should learn from it and get how to emerge stronger after these experiences. But sometimes it's not the kid alone. It is the coach.
You're right.
Well.
You're totally right.
So Carol,
don't go away, Carol. We both have a question
so Carol,
for you.
what did you say to your son?
And how old is he?
He is 13.
Okay.
So I let him be pressed for 2 days. I think he has the right to do that. And then when he finally gets better and wants to talk about it, and I asked him what the coach told him when he got cut, does he agree with the coach reason he got cut?
That's a good one.
And he said, yes, I agree, but it's hurting. I said, I understand that, but we can fail, but we never give in. You need to understand what you need to improve. Learn from it. One season doesn't define you. You can try for another season. So I think we're getting on a good direction with him, but he also said, if it was the coach of last season, I would have made it. So that's my point I want to make. It's it is also the coach. Different coach have different views. And we need to talk to kids about that, too.
Carol, that was great. Your kid sounds like a grown-up 13-year-old. Thank you very much. Pickleball Maggie in Concord, who is often here at the library. Jim, I think it's time you tried pickleball. Maybe Shirley can give you some lessons. No one gets cut in pickleball.
I
didn't know that was true, but there you go. By the way, let me just say, we were hearing healthy stories for the most part. In Cara Baskin's piece, let me consider Anna, she writes. Anna's now a 40-something foundation officer with, by all accounts, a happy life. And yet one of her, quote, core memories, as she puts it, is being one of the very few seniors cut from the field hockey team in the mid-90s. Quote, it was so deeply traumatic to my identity, and to this day, one of my biggest regrets was not just showing up anyway for the final day of tryouts to try to convince the coach I should still make it. I doubt I'd have made it, but at least I'd know I tried everything. It's a 40-year-old. I mean, I'm not criticizing Anne at all. I mean, that's her reaction. But it's amazing that kind of... Now, the question, which isn't told in the story, and Cara can't know this, is how was the... I mean, it's sort of unlike my high school basketball coach, who was really pretty kind to me and warm. How did the coach cut Anna? Right. How did they treat Anna? How respectful was it? You know what I mean? That kind of thing. Where do you want to go?
Let's go to Tim in Needham.
Hey, Tim in Needham.
Hey, so my daughter tried out for her first musical when she started middle school, and she's a fantastic singer, and she actually was very disappointed, got kind of almost last place, an extra part, for a couple different small roles. But she was really upset, devastated. I told her, you're a good enough singer, just keep trying it again, something will come up. The next year, she got the lead part.
Oh.
Wow.
Well, that's a pretty happy ending. How did she react to before she got the lead part, when you told her, try again, it'll come to you, just keep trying? How did that cushion the blow for her there, Tim and Needham?
Well, she's very self-conscious, so I wasn't sure whether she would follow my advice or not the next year, but she did, and, it worked out, so you just got to keep pressing, I guess.
Tim, I'm glad she got it. I'm glad it worked out. Thanks for your call. We appreciate it. 877-301-8970. By the way, I didn't ask you. I asked if you're an athlete. Obviously, you got cut from did you get cut from some teams?
Of course not.
Okay. Now, did you or didn't you?
I didn't.
You did?
But I still remember. I know you laugh. It's like people remember. I'm just saying I still remember, when I tried out for the field hockey team in high school, and you try out, you run your mile, you do your skill work, and then you go into the girls' locker room and you want to see your name. We want to see if you made the list. I still remember that first time. It was so nerve-wracking. So your heart's in your chest, wondering if you made it. So
and did any of your friends not make it?
Some of my friends didn't make it.
And how was that?
They're fine. They're fine. They're successful.
And did they harbor any bad feeling? Not that it was your fault towards you?
No, I don't think so. But I love one of the parents who said, Carol from the soccer mom, who said, she told her son, you can fail, but we never give up. I love that.
I like that. By the way, Aiden, our colleague, says at the end of one of my more traumatic seasons of Little League Baseball, they gave me the trophy. I hope this is true for, quote, hit by the ball the most times. Is that really true? That's a beautiful story. It's really heartwarming. Thank you, Aiden, for sharing that with us. Carrie in Woonsocket, Rhode Island. You are next on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hello. Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you.
My daughter played rec basketball all the way up to middle school.
Yeah.
And I encouraged her to try out for the middle school team. And she made very clear to me that she wasn't going to make the team, so she wasn't going to try out. But a couple years later, her freshman year in high school, the math teacher, who was the women's basketball coach, said to her, I've had a lot of good managers. I think you'd be a great manager. And so he convinced her to help out with the basketball team. And she was the scorekeeper. So she scorekeeped all the way through, and it was a good team, and they made it to state playoffs. And the first playoff game, the coach told her, you don't have to come score. They have official scorers and stuff. But she went anyway. She sat on the bench, and she scored the game. Well, right near the end of the game, all sorts of commotion ended up, and all the coaches are over at the scoring table, and the scores changing up and down on the scoreboard and everything. And my daughter tells the assistant coach, that this shows him what she had. And he looked at it. He goes over. He gets the coach and brings him over, and he's looking over her shoulder at what she did, and grabs the book out of her hand over to the scoring table. He slams the book down on the table. They adjusted the score to the score she had, and the athletic director for the next 4 years credited her with a state championship, because if she hadn't been to that game, the team wouldn't have advanced.
That is like a movie.
Oh, that's a great story.
Carrie, raise your right hand. That is true, I hope, right?
True, yes.
Oh,
That is
wow.
By the way, I'm really glad, not only because it was a wonderful ending, thank you for the call. That's another thing, by the way. If you're really into, let's say, college basketball,
Right.
and you can't, or high school basketball, and you can't make the team, figure out a way to protect. What are you raising your hand? You did that?
So my 11-year-old wants
Oh,
to...
here we go. Okay.
He wants to
He
play...
is not the one you said you're a loser to. It was the other one, right? Okay.
I said he wants to play in the NBA.
He does. How tall is he, by the way?
He's 5'4". He's
that-
not NBA height.
Okay, not yet anyway. Okay.
Not yet. And everyone says, don't crush him. Don't crush him, Shirley. Don't crush his dreams. Don't say, it's
So what do you say to him?
impossible to get in the NBA. So I know not to say that.
What do you say?
I just said, you know what? There are a lot of things you can do. You could work in the front office.
Oh,
you know?
you're already getting him ready.
Right. You work in the front office. You can, maybe do
You can park
analytics.
cars at the garden. That's another possibility. Is that what? That's fabulous.
Well, at least I didn't say there's no way you're
yeah.
going to make the NBA. You know how impossible that is? I don't say that, okay?
Yeah,
That's
I got
pretty good.
that. Okay, that was, again, the one she's nice to because he's got talent, as opposed to the other one who is not quite the same situation. Let's just leave it at that, but whatever. In any case, Tina in Nahant, which is one of my favorite towns to say, I should say. Nahant. Tina, welcome to the show. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Excellent, thank you.
Take my call.
Thank you.
I was calling just to say, my kids are younger and they all participate in town sports, and the level of competition starts at such a young age that I'm seeing, some of the sports, they don't even get, maybe not necessarily my kids, but some of the kids don't even get playing time because, these parent coaches are just putting in the kids that are the best. And then, so it sets up, this unfair situation where those kids that could use a little more time and development of their skills are not even getting the opportunity. And then they end up quitting because it's so frustrating to be part of an activity and not being able to participate.
That's a really good point, which argues to that guy who called before about maybe second-level kinds of teams.
Right.
What are you going to say,
Well,
Shirley?
Tina, you need to talk to the town of Nahant, because the way we do it in Milton, Parks and Recs, I don't think anyone gets cut, but it's when we play the town and rec basketball team, everyone gets equal playing time.
Is that true?
Yeah, so that so I
if
allow.
you make the team, you get.
Yeah, like my 13-year-old, I allow him to play Parks and Rec basketball.
Oh.
He's not a very good player.
No, he's not going to the NBA.
No.
It is the other one, frankly.
The 13-year-old, he doesn't play soccer, but he can play, and he's not very athletic, but he loves playing basketball, and he loves it. And so I feel like there needs to be different levels of sports for everybody.
Tina, that was a great call. Thank you. I love saying Nahant. Now joining us, you want something incredible? I've known you I have no idea. You look athletic.
Yeah, he
does. But were you
does.
ever an athlete when you were a kid?
I did baseball and basketball and soccer and
You did
Oh, that's
not.
serious.
Yeah.
Were you any good in anything?
Wow.
No.
Okay.
But you weren't, obviously he wasn't cut from any teams, or were you?
I cut myself from one of them.
I see.
From flag football because, after about 2 minutes, I thought, I am never going to learn this. This is not going to go well. It's embarrassing when the ref is calling you out for the.
So how far did you play? Did you play sports through high school? Did you
No,
stop in high school?
I stopped before high school.
Yeah.
So I think it was through middle school.
Yeah,
So I wasn't the high school athlete.
So did you ever get cut from any of those teams?
No, I don't think that we did that.
I mean, they didn't cut anybody.
I don't think so.
So it's not traumatic, whatever your sports.
They were just kind of
experience
shame you
was.
into cutting yourself. That's probably what happened to me. Actually, it was probably Shirley who was standing on the sidelines saying, "Jared, you're not cut out for this."
What do you think? I'm glad I wasn't going to bring that up, but since you did, what do you think of her treating her 13-year-old like that?
I love
Dashing
it.
his hopes and dreams
I love
at
it.
a young age.
You need
love
to
it?
understand reality at a young age, and then you either get inspired and rise up and I did all of this despite my mother, or thank goodness my mother helped me.
It's good for them.
Okay, enough of that. What are you doing on that culture show, which, by the way, is live physically at the library at 2 o'clock every Friday. It is a wonderful experience. You should be here. So what are you doing?
It's super fun. It's our week in review show.
Ooh.
So we're going to be talking about Taylor Swift's endorsement and what the celebrity impact is. We're going to be talking about Dave Grohl. Everybody's talking about Dave Grohl, the nicest guy ever.
He has a kid outside. Well, I'm sorry. You're doing the show.
Yeah, he announced this week on Instagram he had a child outside of marriage.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did you see what one of his daughters did? I assume you're going to say that on the show.
We're going to be talking
I
about
bet
it.
you are.
Yeah.
We'll keep it to myself.
Oh.
What else?
And we're going to be talking about this new documentary about psychics. That is the rave. It's getting raves everywhere, and it's just about this culture of. The documentary really looks at it doesn't even matter as long as you believe. So it's kind of a fascinating look at this thing that has really entranced everybody.
Okay. Well, if you have time before your show, if you could call DCF about Shirley, that'd be great. I was going to do it at 2, but if you can spare it, that'd be great.
I was so worried that Shirley was going to say, Jared, you're not really cut out for the culture show, so maybe you should just go home at 2.
Okay. Jared, thank you. We'll be listening at 2 o'clock and watching. If you're not here at the library, you should be here. We're done. Shirley, you were fabulous, as always.
Are you going to cut me next time?
No, Shirley Leung, we'll see you next time. Shirley Leung from the Boston Globe. You can check out our podcast, that's 24/7, or our TikTok page at Boston Public Radio. Monday, BU's head of journalism, that's Brian McGrory, former editor of the Globe. Amherst College's Elon Stalvins. Evan Horowitz from the Tufts Center for State Policy Analysis, breaking down all 5 ballot questions. Harvard's Khalid Gibran Muhammad. Our crew is Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, engineer John McClaw Parker, Bill Piacitelli is on the board today. Executive producer is Jane Bologna. Special thanks to our BPL staff, Matty Geyer, Bill Francis, Kevin Pace Jr., Juan Jose Cardenas, Sandra Lopez Burke, and Brian O'Donovan, one of the greatest people I've ever met in my life, passed away last year, founded the great Rockport Celtic Festival. Its return for its first-year performances are now through this Sunday, the 15th. 8 performances throughout the weekend celebrating musical traditions from Scotland to Scandinavia.
What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Concord Park, a Volunteers of America senior community in Concord, Mass., offering seniors the privacy and independence of their own apartment home, as well as care and support to help meet their needs now and as they age. ConcordPark.org. Salt, fat, acid, heat, action. GBH has the sizzling shows with all the seasonings. Get your favorite GBH cooking shows starting tomorrow at 11 and continuing all afternoon on GBH2.
Trusted, local, news. You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, it's our Arts and Culture Week in Review. First up, it's not over until the cat lady sings, and by that I mean the childless cat lady Taylor Swift, endorsing Kamala Harris, sending pollsters and pundits parsing the pop star's influence on the presidential race. We'll look at the role that celebrities play in American politics. From there, we remember revered actor James Earl Jones as a master of the stage and screen, whose unforgettable voice made Darth Vader the vaunted villain of Star Wars. Plus, another major force in the museum world is stepping down. Glenn Lowry, the director of the Museum of Modern Art, is leaving after 30 years. We'll look at how a generation of museum leaders are moving on after weathering the challenges of the pandemic. That and more next on our Arts and Culture Week in Review.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Biden has hosted the White House's first brunch in celebration of Black excellence. His guests included members of the Congressional Black Caucus.
We don't erase history like others are trying to. We make history.
Delays in the processing and delivery of mail-in ballots, another election mail this fall. NPR's Hansi Lo Wang reports tens of millions of voters are expected to use the Postal Service to cast their votes in the coming weeks.
In a letter to Postmaster General Louis DeJoy, the National Associations of Secretaries of State and State Election Directors flagged concerns that the U.S. Postal Service's internal watchdog also recently raised, including workers not always following the proper procedures for handling mail-in ballots, voter registration applications, and other election mail. Some election officials in multiple states say they've received hundreds of ballots 10 days or more after the postmark. In response, spokesperson Martha Johnson says in a statement that the USPS will work on promptly addressing those concerns. The Postal Service is urging voters who are planning to vote by mail to return their completed ballots early and stop by a post office if they want to make sure their ballots get postmarked. Hansi Luong, NPR News.
In Louisiana, the largest power company in the state says electricity is back for most of its affected customers after Hurricane Francine made landfall earlier this week. However, Stephen Basaha of the Gulf States Newsroom says some of the hardest hit areas of the state will still have to wait until Monday to get power fully restored.
More than 300,000 Entergy Louisiana customers lost power because of the storm. Michelle Berg with Entergy Louisiana says restoration crews have needed special equipment to get around debris.
Yesterday, we even deployed a Black Hawk helicopter carrying a grapple hook, which specialized operators are using to lift trees off transmission lines to accelerate our restoration progress.
The utility reports that almost all of New Orleans has power, and the rest should have power fully restored by Saturday night. The state's southeastern coast was hit the hardest. A majority of customers in Terrebonne Parish were still without power Friday morning. For NPR News, I'm Stephen Basaha.
U.S. stocks are trading higher this hour. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up now 289 points at 41,386. From Washington, this is NPR News.
From the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston, I'm Craig Lamolt. Police will be increasing patrols near houses of worship in Newton today after a shooting at a pro-Israel demonstration yesterday. Officials say the shooting occurred after a man jumped on a protester, leading to a fight that ended in gunfire. The alleged shooter, 47-year-old Scott Hayes, was arrested at the scene and is being arraigned in court today. Newton Mayor Ruth Ann Fuller says she understands the anxiety residents may be feeling in the wake of the shooting.
I would ask everybody to stay calm, to treat their neighbors as neighbors, and please do not hesitate if you have any reason to feel unsafe. Call emergency services.
Newton police are asking anyone with video or information about the shooting to reach out, which can be done anonymously. The victim is alive but dealing with life-threatening injuries. We've had plenty of sunshine over the last several days, but fall is right around the corner, and apple growers say their trees are ready to be picked. Karen Schwalbe heads the Massachusetts Farm Bureau Federation and says growing conditions have been good this year, especially when compared to the floods, frost, and freeze that hit the state last year.
There is some permanent damage there that will take years to recover from, but overall the trees are recovering and there is good crop. And especially because in the lower lying areas, no crop last year meant the trees had a year to rest, and so they can put extra energy into the fruit for this year.
She says the recent lack of rainfall is having some impact with lower yields on corn, tomatoes, and peppers the last few weeks. Sunny today, a high around 80. This is GBH.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. As a fiduciary, Fisher Investments is obligated to act in their client's best interest. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss. This is NPR.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Mass Humanities. You can register for the 2024 Governor's Awards in the Humanities on September 26th at the JFK Library. Honorees include Martín Espada, Jackie Jennings Scott, Bob Rivers, and Cheryl Tony Hawley. MassHumanities.org. And Central Square Theater with The Hound of the Baskervilles, a hilarious adaptation of the Sherlock Holmes mystery with 3 actors playing more than a dozen roles in this laugh-out-loud farce. Now playing. CentralSquareTheater.org.
Welcome to the Culture Show live from our GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. I'm Jared Bowen. I'm joined by co-host Edgar B. Horwick III and Culture Show contributor Lisa Simmons. She's the artistic and executive director of the Roxbury International Film Festival and program manager at Mass Cultural Council. It's time for our Arts and Culture Week in Review. Here's what it sounded like.
Taylor Swift. She endorsed Kamala Harris for president and urged her own fans to go out and register to vote. So the question is, will this have any impact?
Big congratulations to Dave Grohl. He is welcoming a brand new baby into the world. The difficulty is that it was a baby that he fathered by somebody who was not his wife.
Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father. He told me enough. He told me you killed him. No, I am your father.
We're hosting the Emmys, and this year they're going highbrow.
No, they said eyebrow. They want you to make bad jokes about your eyebrows, which you're not doing.
Why don't they go through proper channels? My brows have their own agent.
What did I just say?
What?
Beyoncé has been snubbed by the Country Music Awards despite having one of the biggest country hits of the year with Texas Hold'em. The Grammy winner was notably absent in the nominees for the ceremony.
For clairvoyant readings, I feel like I have this energy and this spirit with me, and I hope that I'm acting as a vessel for something greater than myself.
I didn't have any interest in psychics, but it helped me more than all the therapy in my life ever helped me.
Do you ever doubt what you did? Do you ever wonder if it's not real? Yeah, all the time.
Well, as you just heard, Taylor Swift throws her pop star power into presidential politics in endorsing Kamala Harris. Foo Fighters frontman Dave Grohl's family-friendly reputation takes a hit for being a little too family-friendly, fathering a child outside of his marriage. Then on to another famous father figure, Darth Vader. We remember James Earl Jones, from his magisterial voice to his legendary performances that span the stage and screen for decades. Plus an Emmy Awards preview. Who will the snoozers, snubs, and surprises be? On the big screen, forget the popcorn, grab your crystal ball, and settle in for a new documentary about psychics and why we want to believe. But first up, instead of Swift boat veterans this election, we have Taylor Swift for voting. This week she endorsed Kamala Harris for president and encouraged everyone over the age of 18 to register to vote. So we have talked about this somewhat on the Culture Show. I guess maybe in anticipation of this moment, a lot of people were wondering if Taylor Swift, who is arguably the most powerful pop star on the planet,
or person on the planet,
who could be so persuasive, whether she would move forward in this election and endorse someone, and she did it with gusto, signing herself from the cat lady with a picture of her own cat, Benjamin Button.
Amazing.
Which is amazing for her to do that. But we have been talking about something that I think is shifting in this presidential election cycle, which is the power of celebrity. We've pointed out that this is nothing new. Frank Sinatra sang campaign slogans.
This is the biggest coup since Al Jolson went for Warren Harding in 1920.
That's right.
Even further back.
Yeah.
And but now we have this moment where more than ever, because it has been 4 years, we see people not getting all of their information from the newspapers and endorsements or media, but are taking their cues from celebrity and social media. So how do we begin to measure this impact?
I mean, I think measuring the impact is really difficult, and I think that's not just this; that's just elections in general. But yeah, I think to me the thing that's notable, and this isn't the first time it's happening, but this is definitely, we've seen a creep of this, that the celebrity endorsement, or even beyond celebrities, influencers, people on social media, or people who people are connected to in ways that are outside of the traditional media,
Absolutely.
I think are becoming increasingly important across the board for brands, but also now in politics. And I think it is interesting to look at this coming in concert with the fact that a lot of traditional outlets are now no longer endorsing candidates in the way that they used to. So we're in a very different space than we were, say, 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Exactly, and I think we've seen, and we talked about this too, right, about the Olympics and the influence of bringing entertainers into that space,
right,
to have people really focus on that. But I think it is really interesting. I think everyone was just sort of like waiting, when is she going to do this? When is she going to do this? She did it perfectly. The timing was impeccable. I think it was all sort of strategically done.
Right after the debate.
Right after the debate. I do think it's really interesting that they talk about Oprah and Oprah's endorsement of Obama and how she was just this sort of like same figure as Taylor Swift, and these two are the two that have probably the most, celebrity, sway that's going to help this campaign. We don't know yet because it just happened, but I can't imagine those friendship bracelets sold out in a matter of minutes that they had on their website. 300,000 people went to the vote.org to register to vote. That is unbelievable. So, I mean, it absolutely has an impact.
Well, we can get a sense of that to explore that a little more deeply, because after she made her endorsement, again coming right after the debate, right after the campaign, which apparently didn't know that this was going to happen, issued those friendship bracelets. The Harris-Walz campaign issued the bracelets that have sold out. Taylor Swift made a splash at the MTV Video Music Awards this week as well, having a message after her recent endorsement of Kamala Harris.
And the fact that this is a fan-voted award and you voted for this, I appreciate it so much. And if you are over 18, please register to vote for something else that's very important coming up, the 2024 presidential election.
And Lisa, as you say, 330,000 people went to vote.com after that announcement. Of course, we don't know how they're going to vote, but at least they were moved to go and register to vote. Here is how the GOP responded. Here's J.D. Vance on Fox News responding to Taylor Swift endorsing Kamala Harris.
We admire Taylor Swift's music, but I don't think most Americans, whether they like her music or fans of hers or not, are going to be influenced by a billionaire celebrity who I think is fundamentally disconnected from the interests and the problems of most Americans.
I think I'll point out you're laughing because
billionaire celebrity.
Right.
Did he not know what he was saying?
Well, there were, as Donald Trump the other night in the debate said, there are things that he's not aware of J.D. Vance saying. But of course, Trump has his own influencers speaking out for him. Elon Musk is a very powerful figure.
Absolutely.
He has a very powerful platform, of course, in owning X. And so he has come out in support of Donald Trump, as have others, like Hulk Hogan, as we know memorably.
Kanye West, who did it in 2016. And Mike
Kid
Tyson.
Rock.
So, and Kid Rock. Right. So, I mean, I think the main point here is that celebrities do make a difference. They make a difference, like you said, in ads. They're making a huge difference in politics. And it's because we're on all these streaming platforms. It's because you're right. Traditional media, people are not. The next generations are not getting their news from there.
Yeah, to me that's the story, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people go like, well, what is the impact of this? But they say that it's like, what is the impact of ads on TV? And what is the impact of lawn signs? But I think a lot about how, there's the narrative. And in the news, we often follow a narrative. And people can grip onto a narrative.
Right.
And so you're looking for these like big moments, these big things that make changes. I think about how sports is often covered. And people, they'll kind of get really focused on an individual matchup or one play in a game. But if you talk to coaches, if you talk to players, they're looking to win by making 100 or 1,000 little decisions over and over again in time, in the right order. And when you talk to people who run campaigns, they're saying the same thing. It's
Little
like
by
no
little.
one thing is going to move the needle. It's about that being a part of 100 other decisions that are made. And the fact that the celebrities are now kind of one of those data points, that's the story. It's not whether or not it's an impact. That's telling us what's going on in our culture.
Right.
Yeah, there's just, I can't explain it other than to say that something feels different this time around. And I think it is the way that people have moved away, because I have been firmly in the camp before that endorsements in newspapers do not matter. I don't think we can ever really see a moment, at least that I'm remembering, maybe if I'm framing it around local politics, where it's really made a tremendous difference. But this just feels different, also for the way the messaging can happen, because it goes
and the way
viral
social
and
media
people want to replicate.
Right, exactly, and the way social media is picking up, and it's sound bites. It's like all these sound bites that you can pick up and just roll with it, like you say. Absolutely.
Well, moving on, amid revelations this week about Dave Grohl's fatherly ways, read into this what you will.
Excellent choice.
Yeah, so we're talking about this because the man who has been proclaimed as the coolest, nicest guy in rock and roll
uncle.
Yeah.
has announced that he fathered a child outside of his marriage. And then the story became a little deeper. We realized from some reporting that he had hired or reached out to a divorce lawyer before this announcement came. And then we understand that his daughter shut off Instagram. And so this is
a mess.
Is a hard thing for a lot of people to take who really like Dave Grohl. I'll just start off by saying I don't know that it's that bad, because I think that not that I endorse any of this behavior, but I think this is reality. This happens in a lot of marriages and a lot of families.
Well, yeah, and I wouldn't say that it's not bad. I would just say that it's unfortunate, I think, but you're right. I mean, I think we're going to find over the course of the next couple of days and weeks that this is deeper. I mean, the fact that he went to a divorce lawyer before this, the fact that they dropped this, is impeccable timing. Because as we know, as we're just talking about, timing is everything, and it was right before the debates were happening. It's sort of like it's swept under the rug. And then, you just feel for a family. And she's been, his wife has been, not just his wife, has been a partner. They've done music together. They've done all these things together. So it's definitely going to have this impact.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know what to make of this. I mean, on the one, I mean, it's like rock star has cheated on his wife and had a child outside of his marriage.
Ooh.
Like, how is that a headline? Like, even if he is kind of the nicest guy in rock, even if he has been billed as a family man, I mean, I think this is just like, this is cliche in a way. I mean, this is like rock and roll cliche. Guy's on the road all the time, and he's away from his family, and he's a rock and roll dude. So he's got like strong passions in many fields, and
many admirers.
Yeah, I mean,
and many hanger-oners.
But I think, this is, as you say, like anything. I mean, we all can get caught up in the celebrity thing, and he's a celebrity, and we can analyze this from that standpoint. And there's a lot of that going on, right? Like, good job getting ahead of the story and getting your message out before TMZ found out. And like people kind of analyze it that way, or people analyze it of what are the perils of being a nice guy in rock and roll. Well, here's one of the perils. But at the end of the day, this is a family. He has kids. They're young, right? 18, 14, 12, something like that.
10
to 18.
Yeah, and so this is playing out in public. Like, I can't imagine what it would be like if I were that age and my parents were like world famous. First of all, that's got to be weird. And then add to that the fact that this happens and it's out there in the world. That's difficult for them.
No, I think so. And I think that this was all really about getting ahead of TMZ, getting ahead of everything else, and understanding that it's hard for everybody, but like you say, it happens. But the story is because 21 years later, he's the nicest. They're like, if you had said to me, Dave Grohl had a baby outside of wedlock, people would have said, like, they're saying, what? What do you mean? Like, he
just left $1,000 tip at a restaurant for after one drink, which is a true story, actually.
Exactly. So,
or he went and made barbecue for people who, people who are experiencing homelessness and made sure that they were fed. Like, I mean, but both things can also be true, right? People are complicated. People are complex.
And families are complicated.
He can be a good person. He can love his wife and his children and be like, in that moment or series of moments, he clearly wasn't thinking about them.
Right.
But now he could be trying to manage this as best he can and be a good person.
So we keep talking about timing. The weird thing for me is Netflix just dropped The Perfect Couple, which was shot here in Massachusetts, which I, like many people, binged, which is a story about a really idealistic couple. One of them is super, super famous, and then one of them has a child outside of marriage. And I thought, wait a minute, why does this sound so familiar? And it happens to be the plot line of this series. So,
in The Perfect Couple, not everything's perfect.
No, certainly not. I think maybe it's a function of my age now. I just look around. I think, okay, we see a lot happen, and this is just the reality of life.
I do think it's interesting, though, that he says that I love my family and I need them. I want to make sure that I can regain their trust.
Yeah.
So maybe.
And I think this is such a big story this week in part because he has cultivated this nice guy image, right? If you heard that one of the Gallagher brothers had done this from Oasis or something, right? People would be like, that's not a story. We sort of expected that that's how they behave.
Right.
Let's just hope they don't take it to Dr. Phil. We don't need to do that. All right, well, coming up.
Or Dr. Oz for that.
Right.
Maybe they'll take it to a psychic. Stay tuned.
Good,
That's what they should do.
That's all coming up on the Culture Show. But coming up first, remembering the magisterial and masterful James Earl Jones. That and more is next on the Culture Show's Week in Review. Stay with us.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's art and culture programming.
Now playing on the GBH News YouTube channel.
This morning they were waiting for the blacks who arrived at South Boston High.
Never Cried. Boston's busing legacy.
You don't think about tomorrow. You just think about today when you get in there, get on that bus, get off that bus, get in that school. Then I'm going through today. Thank God I got out. I'm going home. And then the next day.
Watch on youtube.com/GBH News.
Funding for our programs comes from you and the Museum of Science with Survival of the Slowest, a new live animal exhibit that demonstrates evolution down the path less traveled. MOS.org. And The Bowery presents. Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds are bringing the Wild God Tour to Agganis Arena on April 15th, with special guest St. Vincent. Tickets are available at nickcave.com.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, we'll have the latest on last night's shooting at a pro-Israel demonstration in Newton. A national youth voting organization is trying to register more young men of color without pandering. And this week's Joy Beat, Artists for Humanity, helps teen artists from underserved communities become professional, paid artists. That's starting at 4 on GBH 89.7.
This is The Culture Show. I'm Jared Bowen, here with co-host Edgar B. Horwick III and Lisa Simmons, the Artistic and Executive Director of the Roxbury International Film Festival and Program Manager at Mass Cultural Council. If you're just tuning in, it's our Arts and Culture Week in Review, which includes remembering legendary actor James Earl Jones. He died this week at age 93 in New York, and I have to say, we'll talk about his voice in just a moment, but in learning more about James Earl Jones, this was one of the hardest working people you'll ever find in this industry. And he's somebody who grew up in a childhood where it was very, very difficult, I believe going from Mississippi and then to Michigan, where he described his grandmother as the most racist person he has ever known. But he was so driven to make something of himself, as also we have heard much about as a child with a stutter, to go on and have this extraordinary career where he would film a dozen films in a year. There was one period where he did 18 plays in 30 months. I mean, this is just a man who loved the craft and who loved the work. It gives you even more appreciation for who he was as a person.
Yeah, I mean, I love, he also seemed to be somebody who, despite the fact that he was such a large figure and by the end of his career such a revered figure, he was always very self-effacing as well. Like, he's got that great quote where he says, "You can't be an actor like I am and not have been in some of the worst movies like I have." And I hope, by the way, he's not talking about what I think people do think of as a bad movie, which is The Best of the Best from 1989, where he's the coach of like a American martial arts team that goes over to South Korea. It is terrible. But it is, I recommend, as long as we're talking about James Earl Jones, watch that movie. It's fantastic. Also stars Eric Roberts. Star
of
Dancing with the Stars.
Yeah. I mean, it is heart-wrenching, but he lived an amazing, amazing life, an amazing career. And like you said, I mean, things that people might not know about him is that, he was on The Guiding Light. He was really he created what Sesame Street became, because he was like the test person on Sesame Street. He does the voice for CNN, and Orson Welles was actually the first choice that George Lucas had to do the voice of Darth Vader, which is kind of cool. But I mean, I think that you're right, overcoming what he did in his childhood, that stutter, which came from moving from to Michigan, and I think all that trauma in his life, and then his teacher that basically said, "Hey, you're a poet. If you actually wrote this, then you're going to have to go recite it." And that sort of like changed his world. He had to recite the poetry, and that's when he sort of got bit by this bug. And then we just have years of him in just being this gentle giant and being an incredible person. And Woody King, who's in Harlem and really did a lot of the theater work with him, is always talks about what an amazing person James Earl Jones was.
Well, let's hear from James Earl Jones so that we can talk about just what his voice meant to the world. Here's a montage we've put together of some of his most famous contributions to the world of film and television.
Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father.
He told me enough. He told me you killed him.
No. I am your father.
This is CNN, a network of Turner Broadcasting System.
I'll tell you what. You guys come by here once a week and talk baseball with me. We'll call it an even trade. I'm King Joffrey Joffer, ruler of Zamunda.
This is beautiful. What is that, velvet?
You are my son and the one true king. Remember who you are.
No, please, don't leave me. Father, don't leave me.
Oh, how have we not all been touched by this man?
Well,
Sandlot, I forgot. That was like one of my favorite movies.
He was so wonderful in this.
So wonderful.
And I think it's hard to describe what. Obviously, there's just the quality of his voice.
Yes.
We know that. We can't talk enough about it. But I think this is a situation where it's entwined with the man who just came across with terrific goodness. I have to say, I had the fortune of meeting him once in college, and I was looking back at this picture. I put it on my Instagram. But, and just the biggest smile that he had. And then I remember vividly what that day was like to meet him, and how he was just a super nice guy. He was super kind.
And that hearty laugh.
I mean, but you know, you touched on something. There's a great quote that really caught my eye in one of the obituaries that I was reading about him that kind of gets at, I think, what you were just talking about, Jared, this idea that, especially with a voice like that, it's easy to be focused on the unique timbre and just the sound of the voice, right? But there is... the voice alone is not it. There's the spirit behind the voice, right? So we just heard in that montage him do the "This is CNN," which for years was on the air. Here's what he said about that. When you think about the thoughtfulness that he's bringing to something simple like that, he said, "I just emptied my mind, and then I filled it with the thoughts of the hundreds of stories, tragic, violent, funny, touching, that could be following that introduction."
Wow.
And then I said, "This is CNN." Right? So that gives you this sense of this level of thoughtfulness that he's bringing to the work.
Right. That's what I was going to say. That is an ultimate professional, right? That you're not just going to stand up there and go, "This is CNN." It's actually, hey, he needs to know the motivation behind the words that he's going to say. I mean, I think it was really interesting too for the Darth Vader Star Wars that he was like, he got paid $7,000 for doing 2.5 hours worth of work, which now in today's money would be $36,000. But it never meant that for him. It was never really about that. It was about doing the work. And I had a quote that someone had said. It said, "This man was the living embodiment of artistry, integrity, creativity, and dignity. James Earl Jones is the sole reason I became an actor." Wendell Pierce. And that's exactly what you're saying. All of those things were him. It was his voice that got him into all of those doors, but it was the work that he did and the person who he was that made us really love him and everything that he did.
And if you were here in 2017, you could have seen him in the Night of the Iguana, the Tennessee Williams play at the American Repertory Theater, and I had the fortune of seeing it and realized there in that performance alone you realize the range of his career, because he wasn't somebody who had to come in and be James Earl Jones and be that amazing magisterial huge monument of a man, because this was a character who was at the end of his life, and he totally quieted that performance in that role, and it just made you see him in such a different light
and giving other people and other actors the opportunity to shine. I mean,
exactly.
I think one of the things too is people are like, well, should he be known for an EGOT, because he never won an Oscar? He got an honorary Oscar, but he never got an Oscar. I said, give it to him. This man needs his EGOT.
I mean, which would you rather? Get an EGOT or be compared to James Earl Jones? Yeah. I would rather be compared to James Earl Jones. So whether he has one or not is immaterial.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, exactly.
Well, speaking of awards and status, when isn't it award season? We just came off the Country Music Awards and the Video Music Awards. The Emmys are this Sunday. So let's start with a little forecasting for the Emmys. And we've already have a kind of a sense, because the Creative Arts Emmys have already happened, giving out technical awards. And this was really nice to see, because I happen to really like this show, but Shogun on FX won an extraordinary number of awards, making it the most awarded. They have to qualify everything, but anyway, it got a lot of awards.
It set some kind of record.
It's distinct for limited series, so that should do very well. And also the Bear did very well going into this. So this should be a fun night coming up.
I'm very much looking forward to it, because I love the Levys. I think that they are hysterical, and I think that's exactly what we all need. But I mean,
and Dan Levy
yes,
were
Eugene and Dan Levy,
father-son co-hosts.
and son co-hosts, as we heard in the intro about his eyebrows. No, I mean, I think people are sort of like, oh, it's the Emmys are on again, and it's like, yes, because they had to be done again because
this is the second time we're having the Emmys this year.
I know,
so
and I feel
that's
like
unusual.
we've had this conversation before. Yes, it's very unusual.
Yeah, because they were in January, delayed because of the writer's strike.
Right.
But you've hit on something, which is I mean, I don't know if you two are in this same camp, but I find myself increasingly caring very little about who's nominated and who wins. But I do find myself, and I think these shows are doing a good job of it, wanting to tune in for the broadcasts of the award show because of things like Eugene and Dan Levy being the hosts, right? You'll recall, I don't know if you watched the Emmys in January, but they did something which ended up being quite popular and talked about, where they had these like cast reunions,
which was
of
wonderful.
TV through the years, where they were sitting on the set, like the set of Cheers, the set of different shows, All in the Family. They're going to do something kind of similar this time around. Apparently, they're going to be honoring like great TV characters through history with the people who are coming to present. There's some cast reunions that have been hinted at. I'm way more excited to tune in for all of that than I am to see who wins.
Well, I mean, they have to do that, right?
Right.
Because they were getting very boring and very dry, and people were so you needed to add something to it. So kudos to the producers who are doing this now.
Let me throw this into the mix by way of the New York Times, which wrote a piece this week, and they wrote a piece about the 50th anniversary of the Super Emmy, which I don't think did any of it.
What is the Super Emmy?
Exactly. This is hilarious. In 1974, they tried a stunt, and so you had your winner of Best Actor in Comedy and Best Actor in Drama. So then let's have a runoff, basically.
It was like a tournament.
And then so that year, Alan Alda won both. He won for MASH, and then he beat Telly Savalas in Kojak, so he could win the Super Emmy in his category. But why the New York Times is trotting this out is because this makes sense now. Because look at this. The Bear is nominated for so many Emmys in the Emmy category, in the drama, in the comedy category. See, I just confused myself.
Right, because we talked about this before. Is it a comedy?
Is it a drama?
It's not at all a comedy.
Is it a TV show? Is it a piece of streaming content? I don't know.
It is definitely not a comedy.
So, by way of example, Jamie Lee Curtis just won, again, in the Technical Creative Arts Emmys for Guest Actress in a Comedy. This is from her scene having a meltdown at the Christmas dinner table in the Season 2 episode that's very famous of Hulu's The Bear.
This is beautiful. Am I okay? Am I okay? Are you mother okay? Are you okay, Lee? You didn't do This is gorgeous.
All right, we'll fade this out now, but if you haven't seen it, this was one of the most tense hour episodes of television ever. And we can laugh about it now, but when you're watching this was drama. And so this has blurred the lines of this. And I'm with the New York Times. Maybe
bring back the Super
Emmy.
Bring
back the Super Emmy, or just get rid of these ridiculous comedy
was the Super
or
Emmy
drama.
like twice as big as the regular Emmy?
Yeah,
was
you
it
had
just
to
like
have
a larger
U-Haul
Emmy?
to take it home. All right, I went long in the Emmys, but let's go quickly talk about the VMAs and what were highlights for you? Let's start with you, Edgar.
I mean, I think I find what really stood out to me about the VMAs, just in general, is we are clearly in a period of nostalgia for the 1990s. The like late 80s and 1990s have really hit like sort of peak. Like it is informing fashion again right now. It's informing the design of the set. It was informing who they were bringing on as guests, the references that they were making in the performances, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So that's really what struck me watching
and
it.
that people talk about it as it was like a giant pop celebration.
Yeah.
Right? It was sort of like doing the Emmys and bringing back all the old people to do this.
That's exactly
to do the same thing. And to do the mashup and have LL Cool J do a mashup. Like, it's sort of like the same thing. It's like, how are we going to bring people in? How are we going to keep them here? How are we going to, instead of it just being an award show, it needs to be an actual, you're competing with all these other things that are streaming. So I feel like the same thing, too. I feel like it was just this, like, beautiful show,
major pop celebrities, people, having a great time dancing in the aisles to everybody else's music. It's like, oh, we love each other. It's a big collaboration.
And of course, Taylor Swift was there.
Yes,
And
well, that's what I mean, is
as
dancing in the
about.
aisles too.
Yeah. And before we leave this,
Katy Perry.
the CMAs, and the big news is not that they've happened yet, but what's not going to happen there, which is we learned this week, and this is something we also wondered about actually, when Beyonce dropped her country album. Although she would argue this is a Beyonce album, it's not necessarily country, but it was definitely her moving into that sector. We wondered how the country community would respond. I think we know well now because the CMA nominations came out and Beyonce got none.
0.
So this is a good moment for us to play a little bit of Texas Hold'em. So let's remind people of what they're not honoring. So when you have Dolly Parton coming in to work with you on this album, the queen of country music, and you put together an album like this, which is so pushing the form forward, so clever, and then this community still can't recognize it, I know I'm literally speechless is what I am, because I really didn't think something like this was going to happen. I really didn't.
Here's what I find really interesting, right, is that Post Malone, who also comes out of the world of hip hop, who also he was born in upstate New York, I think it's Syracuse, but he moved to Texas when he was 10. Beyonce grew up in Houston, so they're both from Texas. They both come from the world of hip hop. They both recently have made albums that either critics or they have called country music albums, right? Post Malone has a bunch of nominations for one of his songs. Right. His album will not be eligible. The full album won't be eligible till next year, but it's been very widely embraced. Now, maybe part of that is that his album, despite the fact that he's coming through hip-hop, does sound a little bit more like what we think of country music being in 2024. And, Beyonce's is a little bit harder to put your fingers on in terms of genre. Right.
Yeah, but it's still a snub. It's still,
I just think the comparison of those, it is very interesting to look at it and ask the question why, and I don't have the answer, but why is Post Malone's country work being accepted? It seems in a way that Beyonce's is not.
Well, and I think there's a number of things here, right? I mean, the whole album itself is not really country, right? But Texas Hold'em, yes, I think that was a huge snub. It should have been at least nominated for the single. It is just like a lot of other people's songs, but it does have that country. She did talk about how this ain't a country album, it's a Beyonce album. And then I think it was her fans who went to Apple TV and said, no, this needs to be on the country chart. I do think that you were talking about how the VMAs and even the Emmys are sort of trying to go back to the traditional. I feel like country music is trying to do the same thing. Plus, it's like a club, right? It's like if you're not on these radio stations, if you're not being played on these stations, if you're not, okay, what is really traditional? I mean, let's think about who else was snubbed at the CMAs. Zach Bryan. I mean, one of the top country music people next to Morgan Wallen. And he also got snubbed, but because it's not that purity. So what's happening
you got
to
too
CMAs?
Big. You think you're better than us.
Yes, because you're on another station. You're pop. You're on somewhere else. You're not just on country station. So I do feel like I understand this. I don't agree with the snub of her Texas Hold'em album. I mean, her Texas Hold'em single, but I do understand. You can see the way that this is moving, and that these folks were not nominated because of these reasons.
Well, as I often say when we talk about the awards, they're probably more political than they are about content and merit. So that's definitely, I would argue, is a factor here.
Yes.
Well, coming up, if you're a psychic, you likely know what's coming up. Those of you who aren't, in a new documentary, a skeptic makes a film about psychics believing along the way. That and more is next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
Everyday people.
There I was, standing in front of my 92 Nissan Stanza with all of my belongings packed inside of my car.
Personal stories.
I had never lived more than 30 miles from the high school I graduated from. And there was a struggle there, where sometimes it was just me at home with the popcorn and a glass of red wine, missing home, missing family, missing belonging. I decided I needed to be more intentional.
Stories from the stage. Sunday night at 7 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you and Boston South Visual Art Trail, including Attleboro Arts Museum, the Art Complex Museum in Duxbury, Fullercraft Museum in Brockton, Plymouth Center for the Arts, and South Shore Art Center, Cohasset. BostonSouthVisualArtTrail.org. And North Shore Music Theater, presenting $1 Million Quartet, the jam session with Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Carl Perkins that made rock and roll history at Bill Haney's North Shore Music Theater, September 24th through October 6th. Tickets at nsmt.org.
Nature is all around us, and there's some pretty unusual, amazing creatures if we know where to look.
To me, like looking around, it's like we have alien life all over this planet, and we don't always remember to appreciate that or think about it that way.
Like this adorable flightless parrot that lives off the coast of New Zealand. We'll explore some of the world's living wonders next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Welcome back to The Culture Show. I'm Jared Bowen, live from our GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. I'm joined by co-host Edgar B. Herwick III and Culture Show contributor Lisa Simmons. If you're just tuning in, it's our Arts and Culture Week in Review, which includes Glenn Lowry. The longtime director of the Museum of Modern Art in New York is stepping down after 30 years, making him the latest high-profile leader to exit the museum world. I think this is really, really significant for a couple of reasons. One, being that that MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art, is one of the most attended museums in the country. It's in the top 3 after the,
Is that amazing?
the National Gallery in Washington and the Met
Yeah.
also in New York. I think this is significant because he was there for 30 years and really helped shape that institution. He made it bigger. He increased the endowment. This is unbelievable. He inherited a $200 million endowment and made it $1.7 billion. That's $1 billion.
With a B, billion
so
with a B.
he crafted this large legacy. But the other thing that I think is really significant, and this is what ties it back to Boston, is that he chose this moment to step down. He's obviously seen his museum through 3 decades of growth and experiences, most recently like COVID. And we're seeing here in Boston a new director at the Harvard Art Museums. Jill Medvedow at the ICA is leaving at the end of the year. Matthew Teitelbaum at our Museum of Fine Arts has announced that he's stepping down next year. We have Loretta Greco, who's now leading the Huntington Theater Company here in Boston. Chad Smith is now the new leader of the Boston Symphony Orchestra, in that position less than a year. I think that COVID and everything that has happened over the last 5 years has made leaders think, okay, I've gotten my institution this far. I am now stepping down. A lot of these leaders are of a certain age, and they recognize that this is the time to turn it over to a younger generation. So I think we are on the verge, especially here in Boston, given all the institutions I just mentioned, of seeing a vast change in our cultural landscape with new blood.
New blood and new, younger blood.
Know, I find myself wondering, and I don't know this answer. I wonder what you two think about this, but I think about, maybe around a generation ago, there was this huge movement, a lot of universities, for example, right? It used to be such that it was somebody from academia usually ran a university, and we went through this period where it became people with business experience and fundraising experience, and the profile of the job changed, and it led a lot of universities to choose different kinds of leaders when they went through this
different
shift.
types of things.
Is there something on the ground when you look at this cultural shift that's happened? It sounds like this leadership shift that is happening at cultural institutions. Is the profile of who the leaders that are coming in going to change? Is it different types of people who are going to be stepping into these roles, do we expect?
I think that the people that are stepping into these roles have maybe a broader, a broader resume. Like they're known for doing different things. But I do think that it's just like in the nonprofit world, right? That you have a different leader for different times. And when you're trying to grow an organization or when you're trying to build programming and do community outreach, I think, for MoMA, you're right. I mean, I think that they said they probably would have renewed his contract. He says, I'm thinking about the future of the museum, and I just thought, carpe diem is what he said. All the things I set out to do 30 years ago, either accomplished or in play in a very positive way. And I didn't want to be the person who stayed too long, which I think is really important, right? You don't want to be that person that's just now dragging down. You've done what you needed to do. You've set your mark. You've set your legacy. And now it's time for somebody else. It's time for somebody else to come in and either take that legacy or create their own.
So, and I think that's exactly how I would answer, Edgar, your question, because take Jill Medvedow,
Right.
for example. She inherited a museum that was in a small police station not very far, just a few
Remember,
blocks
that was
away,
right here.
right up on Boylston Street, this tiny little museum. And, of course, with her staff and with a great board, she was the visionary who brought them to the seaport. Remember, her museum was that, and I think in the,
It was like the only thing
Moakley
there for a
Courthouse.
There
while.
was nothing
There was
else.
nothing
There was
down
just
there.
like
Remember, that was
out on an island. It
Where are
seemed
you
almost.
going?
Just,
Which many
it
people
was
said
like the end of the world.
How are
Look
we
at it
gonna
out there.
find
It's like a
you?
lighthouse.
But she built a museum not only now in an iconic spot in Boston, bringing in different architecture, but also creating a permanent collection within that museum, building an endowment. Also
Yes.
was the visionary behind the watershed across the harbor, so that they could have a free exhibition space every summer that is huge, so you can change the scope of the work you're presenting. So she essentially, you can argue, built that museum as we know it today. So yes, to your point, Lisa, it'll be interesting to see who they bring in now, because that'll give us an indication of what they want to see become the next iteration
Exactly.
of the museum after what Jill Medvedow built.
Exactly. And I think that that's the most important thing, is when you're building out these spaces, when you bring people in and they do that, it creates this way of experiencing art in art museums in a whole different way, and it opens it up for other, interpretations of whether you're viewing art, whether you're doing presentations and concerts and all of these things that art museums have become. They've become just a cultural space where all these things can happen.
And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. I know from his interview on The Culture Show, that's what Chad Smith has talked about. This is something he did in Los Angeles, is looking to replicate here in Boston. And I think that's the other really significant part, is when you have a bunch of new leaders coming in at the same time. And they're not adhering to any rules.
That's right.
They can collaborate, they can do new things, and they're all the freshman class playing together.
And I do think that this new group is also thinking so much more about community and how we let the community in. We talked about this about Mass MoCA, about how Mass MoCA was like, we need to open the doors wider to allow people and the people in the community to be part of it.
And I think that's part of a larger trend, right, for cultural institutions in general. This is a theme that anybody stepping in now with any, with that has been in this world for the last 10 years sees that this is a theme for museums, for cultural institutions.
And you have all these opportunities now. Yeah.
Well, next, a new documentary titled Look Into My Eyes offers a glimpse into the psyches who seek out psychics. Here's from the trailer of Look Into My Eyes, where a group of New York City psychics conduct deeply intimate readings for their clients, revealing loneliness, connection, and healing.
For clairvoyant readings, I feel like I have this energy and this spirit with me, and I hope that I'm acting as a vessel for something greater than myself.
So I'm seeing other children on the other side that didn't make it on this side.
Wow.
Okay, I see 2 of them.
Wow.
All these traumatic pieces that keep cutting at us.
Why am I wearing his chains?
Right? See? Go ahead, Grandpappy.
His life with you wasn't for nothing. It taught you things.
Step into the emotional scary space. It's gonna be good.
What else would you like to know?
This is one of the things, Lisa, you brought it to us in our editorial meeting yesterday about today's show. And then I feel like now that after you introduced it, I'm seeing it everywhere. And this is getting rave reviews.
It is. I just thought that this was really interesting. I felt like it was really an important film. I feel like, Lana Wilson has done a lot of really great docs. She did the documentary on Taylor Swift. She did a documentary on Brooke Shields. She did a documentary on suicide and on a monk who does helps people with assisted suicide. And sort of a lot of the themes in her films are about this feeling, about this bringing in the personal, about helping people understand themselves, about this like meditative practice. So you think, here's this film about psychics. Okay, I'm going to watch this film because it's just about, Edgar too. And you're like, oh my God, this is so gripping. It wasn't just about the psychics. It was about the people that seek them out. And really, it's therapy. She's like, I don't care if you believe it or not. It actually helped. She went there after Donald Trump won.
It's great documentary filmmaking.
It really is
not
beautiful.
Really even about psychics
per
se. Also, I would say one of the things that really struck me about this is I would argue, having watched it, it is a movie about New York City.
Yes, because she's really
the opening shot. The opening shot of this film is this slow shot from outside one of these big apartment complex buildings in New York, and it just, you hear the voice of what's happening inside. the camera just slowly comes and you see this one window. So, you know,
At
this
night,
is what's happening inside of that window. And all of these psychics are living in New York. All of these psychics are adjacent or in the acting world or the art world or the theater world. It is a very New York story in a way. This idea that there are these thousands of stories in New York, and in behind the walls of any apartment, you don't know what's going on.
Well, I mean, one of the wonderful things about that, as you talk about you come from this grand space and then you go into this smaller space. But I think New York, because she lived in New York for 20 years, and you walk by these, come see a psychic, take 5 minutes, come see. So she's like, I'm just going to do this because she felt so much distraught. But I just learned so much, and also like the pet psychiatrist, the pet psychic. But I do think it was really about people coming to see them because they all had suffered some sort of tragedy and they just wanted to know that it was okay. And then you find out that the psychics also had suffered their own tragedy. So they were like channeling back and forth, and people just felt better when they left, knowing that either their person who passed could hear from them or that their pet was doing okay. Whether you believed it or not, it was just a beautiful film.
And it's made with empathy. It's not. There's no judgment. There's no real point of view necessarily to this story. The point of view is just that I am going to present these people in a light that is going to allow you to experience as best as I can what I think they are experiencing, and I'm going to put this in front of you, and I'm just going to let you experience it with them, and then walk away having experienced this and think about it for yourself.
And whether you're going to do
Which
it.
is great documentary filmmaking.
Great to watch this week. And the reason I've been silent for the last 90 seconds is because I had a series of internet fails and I couldn't access it. But I am so eager to see this because it sounds like, as you're saying, this is a movie about loneliness too, and how in this culture, in a city like New York, or in any tight community, you're finding connection. Again, whether you believe this or
Jared,
not.
you hit it right on the head.
I emphasized myself with lightning, actually. That's how strongly I feel about a film I haven't been able to watch yet. So that was the sound of our lightning. That signals the sound of our lightning round. These are the stories that caught our attention this week. Edgar, let's start with you.
Okay, so it's college football season, as most people probably know. And, at the college football games, there's often these little giveaways, these little things when there's breaks in the action. So Purdue University this weekend, there's one of these. It's the Kicks for Cash Challenge presented by Rohrman Automotive. Right? So the challenge is this. If you can make 3 field goals, 20 yards, 30 yards, 40 yards.
Piece of cake.
In 30 seconds, you win a 2-year lease for a car, free lease for 2 years on a car, plus $250. Enter Zachary Spangler, a student at Purdue University. He pulls it off, remarkably. Pulls it off. Then he gets an email from the Rohrman Group a few days later. We've reviewed the tape. Turns out your last kick was 0.07 seconds too late. So they rescinded his
shame.
Total
shame. Game of Thrones shame. That's Game of Thrones. That's shame.
Then they doubled down and posted on social media about the fact that they rescinded this and said, who knows what will happen next week for our challenge, so tune in. Of course, they got lambasted. People are like, wait a minute, you're not giving him the car? Like, what are you doing here? So they got crushed on social media. A rival local car dealership stepped in and told the student they'd give him a car. Then they reversed face and they said, all right, well, we'll give you the car or $5,000 if you want it. He said he's going to take the $5,000. The other place said the car's still yours, so he might walk away with a car and $5,000.
Or maybe 2 cars and $5,250.
This is just one of those
It's a crazy
where you just need Oprah to hear it, and then you get a bunch of
you
get a car,
you get a car, everybody gets a car,
and you get to pay all the taxes. That's the other side of that story. Lisa Simmons, what caught your attention?
I have 2 things that caught my attention. One was Real Women Have Curves is going to Broadway. If anyone saw that at the ART last year, it was brilliant. I'm really excited, and I think all of us were sort of waiting to see when it was going to hit Broadway. So it looks like it's going to debut in Broadway in 2025. They haven't done the cast yet for it yet, but I mean, I just feel like the ART has made so many changes in the last 10 years, right? From what it was to what it is now. I just went to see Romeo and Juliet, and I just feel like there's so many things that are coming out of there that are just moving on its way to Broadway. Diane is doing a fantastic job. Diane Paulus, artistic director of the ART. And the other thing that caught my eye was that I had the privilege and the pleasure of going to Harry Potter The Experience, which is just opened today at the Cambridge Side Galleria in the old Best Buy space, much better space for this.
And how was it?
It was amazing. It was fun. It was interactive. They do have butterbeer, and they have hats, and they have all sorts of things, and they have a great store. Because you always need a good story.
Well, we're going to be having them on the Culture Show pretty soon, so we
good.
can explore that even
Yes.
more deeply.
Awesome.
Well, Lisa, if you're going to do two things, I'm going to do two things.
Wait, I want a second one.
you do.
It turns out if you're in trouble, you're in any sense of trouble, you just need a celebrity near you, because we have these two stories this week. There was this amazing story. John Bon Jovi was filming a video in Nashville when he looked at a woman who was on the ledge of a bridge in Nashville, and she looked distressed, and he went over and spoke to her and got her to come off of the ledge, gave her a big hug, and she didn't do what maybe people thought she might. And so he's being credited with really helping this woman. And then here in New England, there was a lobster roll eating contest. Where Governor Chris Sununu, nobody else, this is fascinating, nobody else looked at this lobster roll eating contest and saw this man in distress. Governor Sununu leapt forward and started giving him the Heimlich maneuver. Rescuers took over. The man didn't have his glasses on, so he didn't even know he was being rescued by the governor. But this is the best part. After he was rescued,
I don't want to hear this.
He ate 7 more lobster rolls because
why not?
Why be intimidated?
Well, he was all the throat was all cleared out. He could really get it down.
And it's the summer.
Now.
You're not going to get a good lobster roll
the
after
lobster
this.
rolls
He's
are going
thinking,
away.
I'm not going to get a good lobster roll in October. I've got to eat it now.
He's got to get them all
absolutely.
down.
So watch where your celebrities are at all times, because you don't know when you're going to need them.
When you're going to need to be saved.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being here. It's always great to have you here on the show with us.
Always great to be here.
That is all for this edition of The Culture Show. A special programming note, tune into the PBS NewsHour tonight, where you can see my conversation with the button man, Beau McCall, who has been very fashion-forward since the 1970s, as we find in a new exhibition at the Fuller Craft Museum in Brockton, where admission is always free. Edgar, what's on the curiosity desk?
You got me. I don't really even know what we got coming. No. Next week, I think we talked about this last week, but next week our new episode drops all about garbage disposals and what happens when you drop something down at garbage disposal. Where does it go?
Well, you don't go after it. We know that.
Well, you should not go after it. No,
right,
unless there's a celebrity around to save you.
And you can tune into The Culture Show on Monday for writer Zadie Smith, whose latest novel titled The Fraud is really a meta-novel about fiction. We'll also get a preview of the Boston Film Festival now in its 40th year. And thanks to the BPL today for the technical and logistical assistance from Maddie Geyer, Bill Francis, Sandra Lopez-Burke, Juan Jose Cadena, Chris Hanks, and Amanda Francis. Also thanks to City Table, the Next Hotel, and the Newsfeed Cafe. I'm Jared Bowen. Have an art-filled weekend.
Where is Mary? Where is she? Where is she? She's just about to close up the library.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.